Hey guys, Dark Humility here. Always catch me at www.twitch.tv/darkhumility for Diablo 2 content, usually 6 or 7 days a week. Today, guys and gals, and all the peoples out there, we have a very special LOD guide. This will be D2R prep guide number 4, Poison Necromancer. Today we'll be going over his standard setups, his magic find setup, his cow setup, budget setup, so you can make him with cheaper gear and it still be effective, and his hardcore setup. I'll not be doing the hardcore setup on an actual hardcore character because I'm actually missing a pretty key item on my hardcore grail. I am going to be doing all of these setups and be doing this guide using solo self-found items on my pluggy Holy Grail, and we will be going over the stats, the skills, and the gear, and the strong areas for every setup. So we'll be going through it all. I love the Poison Necromancer. This is arguably it might even be my favorite like late game setup game. Like Necromancer is my second favorite class behind Sorceress in general, and I would put it up there like in my top 3 favorite builds of all time on Diablo 2, up there with Lightning Sorceress, possibly some other build, Hammered In, Pestilence. I definitely love things like that. But without further ado, guys, let's get into the beat of this and see what Poison Necromancer is all about. Yep, I got a new haircut. That's right, Reptar. How you doing? All right. So, Poison Necromancer. Not gonna lie to you guys. Overall, this is an S tier density clear. He's an incredible build. He destroys and flattens density, especially once you get your full gear. But in general, it is not a cheap build. Even the budget setup, which we're going to go over later, is a bit expensive. I feel like this character is all about positioning, fast rotations, and a decent amount of damage. And without any of those things, he definitely struggles quite a bit. Also, I feel like he really is meant for higher player count, which means that single player, either backslash like players 3 through player 7, or on BattleNet with at least some kind of a party. In Players 1, he just doesn't thrive too much at elite sniping, killing those champions, elites, and super uniques. He's all about destroying as many monsters as possible. So because of that, his gear can be a little bit expensive. Of course, we're about to go over that in a moment. Alright. Let's get it, guys. Let's get it. Alright, so this is a level 97 Necromancer I made myself. Our solo self-found here, and we have just enough strength to wear our gear. That's the key on the standard build. So yeah, we're going over the standard build, by the way, just to make that clear. This is the standard setup we're going over first, which is what I consider to be his just generic setup that does it all and is balanced in terms of most things in general. It's kind of the jack of all trades of the Poison Necromancer. It's got a lot of flexibility with this build and whatnot. In general, that's usually what I consider to be the standard build. The specialized builds are better at very specific things. But yeah, anyway. So, without further ado, we got stats. Once again, strength, just enough to wear your gear. You don't need to put any points into dex on this build. There's no gear that requires dex either. And then you just stack the rest of the points into vitality. That's it. Stats are really simple. You might notice my res is just okay. Cold and light res are the most important in hell mode in general, and the other two are kind of optional. But if you ever want to swap out more skillers for more res, or swap out more gear, just get better gear with more res, you always can. One thing to note is because this is also self-found, this gear can be made a lot better. So we'll talk about how things can be improved, of course, or different options for gear when we get to that. He's got a decent amount of magic find. Over 300 magic find is really solid on the standard setup, at least for what I'm currently using. And then this is the real key, man. This is the real key. 125% faster cast rate. That is where the magic happens. So on the standard setup, if you can get 125 faster cast rate with the gear that he's wearing, which we'll talk about once again in a moment, that is the dream. 60 FHR, so we're hitting the 56% faster hit recovery breakpoint. Necromancer. 125 is also the maximum breakpoint. So this is not the maximum FHR breakpoint, but this is the maximum faster cast rate breakpoint. One thing to note is you can also aim for a higher breakpoint on this character, 86% if you want to. It's not really necessary, but it's definitely an option. 125% though is where he's just so ridiculously strong if you can get to 105%. But 75% builds are also fine. When we go over the budget build and the hardcore build, you guys will be seeing 75. And in general, that's pretty much all the really keys. Have a decent amount of magic find, maximum FCR, and a decent amount of faster hit recovery, decent res, and good damage. So damage was hitting 10k there. Saw a second ago when we were bowed. And that's really solid stuff in general. Alright, so them's the stats. Now the skills. It's going great, King Colt. We are doing a Poison Necro guide today. What's up, Oh Bad Jaw? What's up, guys? What's up, Meter? Hey, thank you, man. We're flying, man. We are flying, and everything about the Poison Necromancer today. It's gonna be alright. So lower resistance. You're gonna want to make sure you get like pretty decent amount. Even with just 1 point to lower resistance, though, you get a ton, and there's pretty heavy diminishing returns on this. I went for 63. If you saved a couple more skill points from elsewhere in your skill tree, you can get to 64, maybe even 65. But in general, that's a pretty good target, though. Getting somewhere between like 61 and 65. The more negative enemy resist, the better. This is your primary curse for lowering the resistance for Poison Nova itself. So it's a very, very key ability for making sure you do maximum damage to your Poison Nova. In LOD, you can drop monsters' resistances down to -100. So having this in hand and having even more negative enemy res on your gear is going to be very important on this build. Alright. Next up, we have the synergies in Poison Nova. So this is the core of the build. This is absolutely required to get maxed out Poison Nova, Poison Explosion, and Dagger. The other requirement, which might not be super intuitive on a Poison Nova Necromancer, is Corpse Explosion. It's all about the radius. You don't get any more percent of corpse life done to them at all, but by leveling this up. But you get more radius. Radius is huge. Every time you use Corpse Explosion, that means that if you use Corpse Explosion on a corpse of a monster, it will do that percentage of their corpse life. It'll hit all the other monsters around it when you explode that corpse. And the larger that radius is, the more monsters you can explode simultaneously. So that's maximum Corpse Explosion in maximum Poison Nova, and the synergies are absolutely required on a strong Poison Nova Necromancer. Yeah, feel free to check out the results of Battle of the Pit Encore yesterday. We had Poison Nova taking it. He had a burr on top of everything else matching the Javazon, so yep, it was pretty easy to call last night, and it's fitting we're doing the guide for him today because he was victorious yesterday. It's just a crazy build, I mean, for more reasons than one. Alright, anyway. Bone Armor, I like to put one skill into this. But if you put more points, extra points, see this is where you can kind of choose between like lower resist, bone wall, maybe even Iron Golem, which will or not Iron Golem, but the Golem Master to make Iron Golem tankier. There's definitely choices where you can put these points. I decided to put more of them into bone walls so that I can synergize bone armor and make my bone armor stronger. I like stronger bone armor. It definitely saves me from getting a one shot, so I kind of prefer that. Die on this build, you lose your Iron Golem and have to remake your Iron Golem, so that kind of sucks. But in general, you could put him here, you could put him here. And in the final tree we're going to look at here, you can even put them here. This tree, though, all you gotta do is make sure you get 1 into Revive, and then to Skeleton Mastery, and 1 into Summon Resist, so you have at least some synergy for your Revives. Main thing is just making sure Revives are tanky, though. They're not meant to do any damage, they're meant to tank for you. They're meant to provide a bit of a meat shield. And then Iron Golem, making an Insight Iron Golem, I'd say, is just awesome on this build because you use so much mana with such quick rotations. It's really huge to have crazy mana regeneration. So that's where the Iron Golem comes in, and that's also why Summon Resist and Golem Master is going to be good. That's one of the options to put some of your extra points when you get to a really high level if you want to. You can put them in there, and then when you make your Iron Golem, it ends up being tankier, and every time you re-enter a game, it is remade, but it persists, so it'll become tankier even if you put points into it later, which is cool. In general, it's good to go. But the keys here are Iron Golem, things that make them stronger, and things that make your Revive stronger and Revive. You don't need more than 1 point to Revive. You don't need more 1 point to Iron Golem. You're not trying to do damage with these abilities. These are for utility and for tankage in general. So that's basically all you really have to do on the standard Poison Nova Necro for PvE. And one thing to note, something I didn't mention, is that while you're also getting lower resist, you have to get amplify damage anyway. This is also a very key ability for amplifying the damage of your corpse explosion. Prime. Oh no, I'm sorry to hear that, man. Damn. Let's get some F's in the chat for Prime. That is bad, man. It's okay. Well, you know, hopefully make a new character soon, man. Yeah, what's up, Pocket? How you doing? So, Amp and Lower Resist are your best friends, and when I actually go over this character, I'm going to kind of slow him down so you can see what I'm doing, because when you play this character fast, it can be kind of hard to see what's actually going on. Another kind of disadvantage of this build, I'd say, besides being expensive, even though he's like a monster in density clearing, he's a monster in the pit, and he's a monster in a lot of other areas, is that he can be a bit of high APM. He's a bit high maintenance. You do need to use a lot of abilities in quick succession to kind of make full use of his potential. Alright. So anyway, that's pretty much the skills. You know, we can talk about some other nuances, and with other variations of the build, we can talk about where you might want to put points differently. But we're not to the other variations of the build yet, the other setups. So let's go over... Before we go over the gear, though, let's go over the Iron Golem once again. So the Iron Golem, you might notice, has Meditation Aura. We made him out of an Insight. So you literally just make an Insight Rune Word, 4-socket puller, like one of these. And I wouldn't recommend using an F Thresher. You know, maybe something, at least, you know, something as cheap as an FCV. Maybe it can be non-F, doesn't have to be F. Fun fact, though, if you make it out of an F one, it will actually turn see-through. It will turn ethereal. On D2R, I don't know if that's actually what's going to happen, but it might. It's pretty cool, nonetheless. I'm pretty sure it'll have like a similar effect. It might look even cooler than that. But in general, you want him to be, you want him to have insight. So the aura level matters because it will persist on him no matter what. So I wouldn't really make him out of a low level one, but you know, you can re-roll it if you want with Hell Runes and TP Scrolls, and make a good insight. Mercenary is a offensive Act 2 Nightmare Mercenary. He is Might Aura. I honestly wouldn't recommend anything else other than a Might Aura Mercenary on this particular build, because it's all about getting the first corpse sometimes. And also there's poison immunes, and you can do any area in the game with this character so long as you can get the corpse explosion chain started, even with poison immunes and whatnot. This build's insanely versatile. He's got 3 sources of damage: fire, physical, poison, so he can do it all. The key, though, is making sure the mercenary is really strong, though, so you want him to do a lot of damage. There's some builds where it's optional whether he should do a lot of damage. He should do a lot of damage. Corpse explosion, getting that chain started, getting that first corpse on the ground is pretty big deal. Pretty big deal. Hey, thank you, Azur. How you doing, man? Yeah. Had it since yesterday now. It's pretty sick though for sure. Loving it. Yeah, so I'm gonna actually explain a budget version of this build today, Prime. Maybe that'll make you more confident in making this build. So yeah, there's some people in the chat being like, I don't know whether I should make this because it's really expensive. And it's true, the best version of this character is definitely expensive. But believe it or not, it's actually pretty strong even with cheaper gear. It's just maybe still not very cheap. There are builds that can run with like almost naked, but this is not one of them. Do not run this build if you're naked. Okay. Um, right. Yeah, you can do that too, Ash. You can go like hybrid Poison Nova, hybrid Skeleton. That's actually, there's someone in the chat that just mentioned that for the standard version of the Necromancer, if you want to, you can actually reduce your corpse explosion radius, and you can put extra points into skeletons actually, and then you can have a solid skeleton army as well, so that you can deal more damage to single targets. But you're greatly reducing your AoE and some of your versatility. So that is a possible thing you can do. We're not really going to focus on. I'd say that's more of a hybrid approach than an actual like full-on poison necromancer. We're not really going to focus on that approach, but it's definitely something you could do. It's a strong idea. It's definitely a strong idea for sure. Um, you can do that. I'd say it'd make for a pretty nice hybrid build. I'd say so. Today we're not really going to be going over that approach at all though, but that is a very solid approach. Something I should maybe mention in the guide that you can definitely do. But we'll talk about some other stuff though. I just prefer the AoE too much, and I feel like that's where this build really shines. And like if you want to run like skeletons, I feel like it is almost always stronger to be on just a pure summon build where you have auras and everything for them. But you know, you can run them instead of revives, but you get so many meat shields with revives. I don't even know. There's definitely options for sure, but you know, we'll show how this build plays, and you guys can definitely try out other variations yourself. There's always in Diablo 2 an infinite number of variations. All right, anyway, mercenary, infinity. So corpse explosion does both fire and physical damage. Conviction does not affect poison damage. It only affects fire, cold, and lightning. It reduces all of the monster's resistances to those elements by 85. It's pretty big in that regard. But corpse explosion, half of its damage is fire damage. So that means negative 85 fire res on all the monsters is going to make your corpse explosion even more ridiculous. That is how we're going to wreck, flatten, and level player 7. If you want to flatten monsters in a full game, or in player 7, /player 7, single player, this is the way to do it. It's definitely best in slot, but it's not for the reason I think a lot of people think. A lot of people think it helps out the poison damage on this build. It does not. It will do nothing. However, it's also giving your mercenary an insane amount of damage, and since it's in an F Thresher or F Giant Thresher, it's going to be very fast. Whenever using Infinity, Fortitude and Jarl's Visage are going to be staples. Whatever quality you can get or afford, the exact defense on them doesn't matter a ton. Also, the 15 increased attack speed, fire res, Jewel in the Andes is always nice, so that your mercenary retains max fire res because it's negative. So in general, that's kind of what you're looking for there. You'll notice that his damage is pretty huge, and he doesn't even have his Might Aura on yet. That's going to be good. We also have Amp at our disposal, so he can one-shot monsters very fast. Very fast. Alright. Yeah, you have to control left click or shift left click the orbs. I always forget which one it is until it happens to me. Let's see, can I make that happen? I can't. Oh, no, that's right, because Pluggy's got it fixed. It doesn't actually do that on Pluggy. Never mind. Rip. Okay, so that's the Mercenary's gear. The standard setup of the Necromancer, nothing beats Death's Web. Period. Period. This is best in slot, 110% on a Poison Nova Necromancer. 2, anywhere between -40 to 50. Honestly, the stats don't matter too much, but the better the stats are, obviously, the better the results overall. Um, this is a pretty nice one. It's got 2 poison and bone skills. It's got high negative poison res. And the life per kill could be a bit better as well. Those also vary, those stats down there, but overall it's really, really solid. What's up, drillers? Yeah, this build is really awesome, and we're going to go over multiple variations of it today. There's one variation which was mentioned in the chat we're kind of not going to touch, which is like a hybrid version where you, instead of going revives, you focus on skeletons, but I don't feel like it makes the most use out of this build, but it's definitely something that can be included in the conversation. Probably will be. Yeah, anyway, Death's Web. Enigma's best in slot. You need mobility. Now, this might be surprising to some people that Enigma is the best in this build because there's a rune word in existence called Bramble. We're going to talk about that today, actually, and we're actually going to talk about a build that it works really well on. However, for the most part, for the versatility of the standard setup and just the speed of killing in general, and just the positioning, which is really huge on this build, Enigma is best in slot. Talk about the Bramble, though. There is one specific situation where Bramble kind of shines. You can use Bramble on this mod, but I mean on sorry, not the mod. You can use Bramble on LOD. You could use Bramble on LOD, but it requires a very specific farm, so we'll talk about when it's used and why anyone would ever use it shortly. Storm Visage. Alright, so this is a 220 Necromancer circlet. It's a very sick circlet. In general, that's all you kind of need is 220, 320, 3 PNB skills, 20 FCR, 2 sockets. You can get Venomous circlet of... What would it be called? Venomous circlet of the Apprentice, yeah. So, or the Magus, sorry. Not the Apprentice, the Magus. So you can get like a really sick magic circlet. Hey, what's up, Babwa? How you doing? Nice to see you here today. We're doing a sick LOD guide today, and you might learn more about the Poison Nova Necromancer, see him in action, and then we'll just have some fun with it. I can already tell that I'll be your best friend in this forsaken camp. Vagwa, thank you so much, man, for the follow. Welcome to the Cult of Xanager's Day. Alright, yeah, feel free to field questions and comment, guys, in the chat, because those do improve my guides, so please do that. Indeed, there's some things I forget to mention, so it's always good stuff. It definitely makes it better. Alright. Circlet. GG Circlet. It's got 50 life on top of 220. I would say this is a really solid circlet, especially for self-found. But keep in mind, you can get anything upwards of like 30 strength, 60 life, 2 sockets. You know, you can get something really crazy. You could get something really nutty, like all res, even base MF on it. You can get all kinds of stuff. So this is really solid for solo self-found. I have another circlet that's kind of like this too. In general, though, this is going to be a lot of good help for you, making your character a bit tankier and just having that FCR. One thing to remember is that we're trying to get 125 faster cast rate on this setup. So you might be wondering, is this really the way for the best Poison Nova Necro? And I'm going to say yes, because you really want that 125 faster cast rate, and it's challenging on a strong Poison Necro to hit that breakpoint. The reason why is because Enigma's a requirement, it has no FCR, and Death's Web is a requirement, and you guessed it, it also has no FCR. So you really need a lot of FCR off of like every other piece of your gear if you want this to be as strong as possible. And then the amulet, it's all about getting either a 210 or a 220 FCR amulet. Now, a 220 would be even more insane. I don't actually have a 220 on my softcore grail. Ironically, I have a 220 on my hardcore grail with all res too, but I don't have Death's Web on that one yet. So, man, I'd love to show you guys the hardcore version, but it's not going to happen on hardcore today because we don't quite have that one. It's okay. I'm showing you guys like items that are realistic. I like to like show realistic items that are things that like I found or made. This is a crafted amulet. So crafted amulets are pretty huge on this build. You'll see another crafted amulet on the other versions of this build, on a couple other versions. In general, this you really need that faster cast rate once again on like every other gear piece. And if you hit 20 FCR, you can even open up another ring slot for a skill ring. Since we're not doing that though, you're gonna see FCR rings, 2 of them, instead of a skill ring and an FCR ring. That's a really sick amulet though. It's got all res. It's pretty sick. Spirit Monarch. This is absolutely required to hit the 125 SCR. Period. You're never gonna hit that with any other combination when you're wearing Enigma and Deathweb. So that's also a very required item, no matter what. Call to Arms and Spirit on swap. Pretty basic stuff. This is just a sick Call to Arms. It's 6/6. Yeah, we did self-roll that, which is pretty neat. We have a 100% perfect Trangle's gloves, but you know it doesn't really matter. It's only the defense that varies on this. In general, this is an absolute requirement as well on this build because for damage, like it's that 25% poison skill damage is insane. It also has your FCR. It's a no-brainer. Like you need your 20 FCR and you need your poison skill damage. You're not using anything else. One thing I should mention about the Spirit Monarch though is that it also has to roll perfect FCR. So 35% FCR. Unless, once again, you want to use like a 215 Necro amulet, then you can maybe drop your FCR down, but notice how tight it is right here. It needs to be like really good there. Rings, the only real requirement on the rings is that they have to have 10 FCR, but res, life, mana, MF, res, double MF, strength. Not really strength so much because you have Enigma, but like all those stats pretty much help though. All that stuff's gonna be good stuff. We're just gonna want those things. You can use blood rings too. You could use like crafted rings. You just need 10 FCR. You really need that FCR. If I had a 20 FCR amulet, I'd swap one of these out with Stone of Jordan, like I mentioned. And Arachnid's Mesh. Yep, that's right, Ash. 100%. That's 100% what you. Arachnid's Mesh. Yeah, I would use Stone of Jordan, by the way. Like, I wouldn't use any other ring. You really need mana, too. Mana is really useful in this build. You just drain your mana, so you need a huge mana pool to make sure that your meditation insight for your Iron Golem keeps up with your mana usage. So that's... In general, you might notice I'm using, like, really high mana FCR rings. Mana is a really important stat. Something I maybe didn't mention before. Arachnid's Mesh... 1 skill, 20 FCR. Once again, you need that FCR, which is this is the best way to get it. I get mana and you get a skill. Can't complain about this whatsoever. War Travelers, I'm just boosting my MF with this. Always use safer options that give you some res. I mean, we're down a bit of fire res as you can see here. Maybe you can get some like fire or poison res. Maybe you can stack your lightning res a bit more if you want to. I wouldn't really worry about your res too much in his primary farm area, but in some areas that can be very important. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, War Travelers are pretty, like, no-brainer, though, on a standard version of this build, I would say. But there's definitely a lot of options there. Okay, and then we also have Necro Torch. We have an Annihilus Charm. So, you might notice these are 2020. You might think I hero edited these in, but no, we actually found them. This is one of my best torches on my grill. Got a 2020 off of Uber. It's pretty sick. Got some really sick charms. They don't necessarily have to be that good, of course, but you know, you get the idea. You just want good ones. Probably one of my most pathetic like grand charm showings on my grill overall are my P&B skillers. You can get up to 45 life on these, and I'd recommend it if you can on the standard version of this build, but I'm using what I can get. I have other builds that have like way better skillers, so this is... I just haven't gotten very lucky on P&B skillers, unfortunately. But if you get better ones, definitely make them better. Eads Fortune is really sick as well. And res, MF, stuff. As good as your res MF can get, you can get 7 MF, 5 all res small charms here, and then of course 5 small charm is really sick, and that's allowing us to hit that 56 breakpoint. I'd be at 55 without it, Necromancer hits a breakpoint at 56% faster hit recovery, so besides the spirit, you actually do need another source. So all these items together, you'll notice we can actually hit the 125% faster cast rate. The only other really thing you can do is you can get a 220 amulet and put on a Stone of Jordan, and you still hit 125, but you can actually get an extra skill for more damage. Or of course you can use Natal Ring or something for MF if that's what you're going for. That's definitely an option. But I really like the mana and the damage for sure. It definitely makes the build feel really good in its generic form. Alright, so I would say that's a pretty good overview of the standard gear, stats, skills, and setup of the standard Poison Necromancer. So now what we're going to do is we're going to demo him in areas that he's pretty strong in so you can see what he's capable of. And we're also going to go over the mechanics of this build and how it works, as well as options and playstyle options for how to play it. That might be alternative. There's definitely a lot of nuance to this build, which is one of the things that makes it kind of fun. This is why it's one of my favorite builds, because it's very situational, and there's just a lot of stuff that's going on when it comes to the Necromancer. So, alright, let's get Wurtzleg into the cube and slam it. Alright, so the first area in that is going to be strong on any Necromancer because of the skill Corpse Explosion is Secret Cow level. Cows are really good at dropping runes, charms, gems, jewels, jewelry, rune word bases, and it also just drops a lot of other items in general. And in here, Corpse Explosion is king. So we got cows all up in here. If I cast lower resist on them first, and Poison Nova, and then amp them, and then cast Corpse Explosion. In that order, in general, I'm going to have a pretty good time. Now you might notice here, I can also revive to get some meat shields up, so my Iron Golem doesn't get wrecked, or my Mercenary, or myself. And then if I teleport around, I can just in general use my skills, my Poison Nova, and my Amp to flatten. With about 10k damage like we have, it's a little struggle to kill them. You might notice it's pretty insane. It's pretty insane stuff. Like, the cow level is awesome for Corpse Explosion because the monster density is very high. And, in general, it's just great stuff. It's really good stuff. So, you might notice here that what we're doing is we're kind of like teleporting around. We gather the cows, low resist them, Poison Nova, Amp, my Mercenary will finish off at least one. And what the Poison Nova is doing is it's reducing the health of every monster. So as many monsters as you can possibly get inside of your Poison Nova when you cast it, the better. So like right now here, I'm actually going to sit in the middle of them. Because that's going to make it to where if I just pop Corpse Explosion a couple times, it's going to be good. Now I started taking some damage there, which took off my Bone Armor. Bone Armor is providing us with a physical absorb shield that absorbs a set amount of physical damage. Once that damage has been dealt, I no longer have that shield, so I have to recast it. So there's a lot of hotkeys. Like, there's a lot of hotkeys here. You know, we got low resist. Once we've used our Poison Nova once or twice, we switch to Amp. And then we do Corpse Explosion. In general, this formula for how to play the character works very well. Don't worry, on Pluggy we can kill the Cow King, but on D2R you might not want to do that because that might not work out for you. You might not be able to remake the cow level. Type USA 14 or USA 15. I never have dashes in between. If you ever see a dash, that means there's 2 commands or more than 2 commands that are being listed there. So just letting you know that you can type either of those commands in the channel. So it means that there's 14 and there's 15. Okay. So yeah, my revives are gone. And yeah, I can get some more revives. Revives are going to be your tanks. Bone armor is going to be your physical damage armor, so you can jump into the middle of them. See, I don't even have to worry too much about landing into the cows because I have bone armor. Since they're not doing any damage to my health, they're not going to put me in FHR lock as well, which gives me the ability to teleport out if that happens. But in general, I want to kind of teleport in a way where I can hit the most amount of them as possible. You gotta watch out for Might Aura though. That's a tricky one. You might also notice we're in player 7 right now. So this is right now simulating a full party in the game. Full party. And look how many items they drop. It's nuts. I think the loot spacing in D2R can be better than this, because oof. It's pretty crazy. Of course, usually people just use loot filters on the standard version for that, but that's some nasty stuff. Yeah, we're playing in player 7, so these cows are almost as strong as they possibly can be, but they're also dropping as much loot as they can. Their no drop is as low as possible, which means that they're almost always dropping items when they die. It's really good stuff. Well, not quite almost always, but a really high chance. Let's put it that way. So yeah, in general, this is one of his strongest areas, but believe it or not, this is not the strongest variation of this build for doing cows specifically. We're actually going to go over a variation that's a lot stronger at doing cows, especially if you've stocked up bird's legs maybe with another character, or maybe someone helped you out with it, or maybe you just stocked them up by running there or using teleport ammies and charges. But we'll talk about, there's actually a version that's even better at that particular area. There's also a version that's better at this other area we're about to do too, just because of Magic Find supremacy in general. Our Magic Find can definitely be a lot higher with a different setup. But this setup in general is the jack of all trades, so we're just going to show off all the areas, and then when we get to the variants, we'll show kind of how they differ in those areas and what kinds of advantages you can get from playing. Alright. So 125 FCR, you might notice as well. We're going very fast. So I'm actually going to start playing much more fluid now. So you can see how it looks when you're doing all of this stuff very quickly. Yeah, so we got damage for days. This is player 7 pit, just getting decimated. In some ways, I consider this build the king of player 7 pit, the king of the density clearing pit. Not even Javazon really quite keeps up with this build. It's close, to be fair, but it's hard. It's definitely a challenge on this build. So yeah, teleporting around. When there's bad auras, I can definitely kite them out. And then I can use Amp and Corpse Explosion to kill them very quickly. As you can see, if this build is played optimally, once again, this might be one of the most high APM builds in the game. Just the way it is. I can revive, of course, to shield myself. Then I can continue on to Pit 2, targeting the really high density areas and targeting the elites. Elites usually have high density because there's minions surrounding them. So, in general, that's what you want to do. And you'll notice with this many poison and bone skillers, it's a cinch. Like, the pit just gets absolutely leveled. Yeah, Javazon teleports pretty slowly. That's definitely her handicap in here. But then again, the Javazon's also a bit cleaner because Lightning Fury, that's all you really have to do. You don't have to like pump out a whole bunch of different skills to make it work. But yeah. When we go over a different version of this build, you'll see that even in player 7, even at high player count, you don't really need all these killers, at least in the pit. The reason why the standard version uses all this damage, though, is that it's versatile. It does the cows, the pit very well, and it does a lot of other areas very well. So, the pit is insane, though. I'd say the pit is the strongest area in the game for the Poison Nova Necromancer. Cows are up there, especially like early game, and especially with a different variation. But that's kind of all I would touch, honestly, in Act 1. This is not a boss farmer. He's not really a key farmer for Ubers either, not like an Uber key farmer. So that's not really what he specializes in. Hey, what's up, Empty? How you doing? What's up, Arabella? Hey, yeah, haircut. Yeah, we got one. How you doing? We got one, and we tipped them well. It was a very good haircut. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you're running with the CE scaling with more players. So Corpse Explosion is really the key to high player count. Like, you can do players 1 in a lot of areas with this build with no Corpse Explosion. Maybe that's also where you might want to focus on the skeleton build we talked about, which we're not really going over today, but Corpse Explosion is so huge in high player count, and it's really what makes this build pop with as a density clear, dropping as many items as possible from massive amounts of monsters. Alright, so in Act 2, that's pretty much it. There's some other max level areas, so I should mention the cows are not a max level area, but they're really good at dropping those types of items I mentioned when I introduced the area. It is a all-around, all types of items drop from the pit pretty easily. You can drop any item in the game, and it's a max level area. There's other max level areas in Act 2. However, they are not very great for this build, I'd say, overall. They don't really make use of its strengths. Maggot Lair, it's just really cramped. You can kill everything in that Maggot Lair pretty easily, unless it's like physical and poison immune, which does happen in there. But overall, it's just too cramped, and it's too hard to get your damage off in there. You also have the Ancient Tunnels. A lot of poison resistance in there. Sometimes even poison immunes. I'd say even most of the time. The embalms. So, not going to be great choices. Poison immunity slows you down, but it doesn't stop you, though. One thing I should note is that even though this is not one of his better areas, we can show it off just to show you guys what he's capable of in here. Just to show that you don't really necessarily need to worry about immunities. We do poison, physical, and fire damage. Physical coming from the mercenary, and half of Corpse Explosion's damage as well, which is the main reason we pop Amplify damage, which is reducing their physical resistance by 100% before we pop Corpse Explosion. So, in general, you can see that even in player 7, we can still blow up this area. But I wouldn't say it's one of his stronger areas for the reasons I mentioned. I don't know if we spawned embalms in here, though. We might have gotten lucky. There's a monster type in here that can spawn that's immune straight up. Oh, there it is. Okay, so if we pop Amp, though, and let the Mercenary go at him, you might notice that all we have to do is pop Amp, land on them with the Mercenary, and then let the Mercenary kill one, and then we just pop the rest of them with the Corpse Explosion. So this build can do it all. Like, it has no hard counters. There's no area it literally, like, struggles super hard in. That being said, there's definitely areas that are better, and the pit's definitely one of them.
I can already tell that I'll be your best friend in this Forsaken.
So you'll notice that with a really strong Corpse Explosion that has a really high radius, and a Mercenary that can kill the monsters, and it has Might Aura. See, the Mercenary now with his Might Aura, now he's got his Might activated, has 7,000 damage with a fast weapon. So he's hitting hard. And yeah, this character just levels the game. That's what he does. He's the Bomberman of Diablo II. And unlike the Summon Necro, who also has Corpse Explosion, he has PMB skillers, and he has more just poison and bone skills in general, especially if you're using like a 320 circlet. and that means that your corpse explosion is going to have an even higher radius on this build. So nothing really matches it when it comes to the radius on the corpse explosion and the radius on... Sorry, not the radius on. Also the fact that Poison Nova drains the health of all the monsters around it, which makes Corpse Explosion's job so much easier and so much quicker. This is the king of AoE on a Necromancer, and it's one of the strongest AoE builds in the game, just overall. I'd like to reiterate that, just so we understand kind of like, what are we dealing with here? He is a monster. He's not really a starter build, so I'm not really going to go over like lower cross rune farming with him. It's definitely something you can always do though, from those super chests. We're not going to talk about that though. Arcane farming is also something that some characters can do. Not really on this dude. You can do it, for sure. There's like no poison resistance in here. But might notice that in P7 it actually takes a couple of rotations to kill the ghosts. That's because their poison res is so high that even with lower resistance, on top of the negative enemy poison res on Death's Web, which is so huge, still not enough to break through all their poison res. So it's also not going to be super amazing in here. Magmax, thank you so much for the follow. Welcome to the Cult of Xana Stay. Well, yesterday we had Battle of the Pit, and we, people lost all their channel points doing that, I am sure. Yeah, so sure. It was definitely good stuff, just in general, though. Yeah, we had the points there. Yeah, man. Yeah, man. Good stuff in general. I am playing that tomorrow. Yes, yes. Yeah, I am playing that tomorrow. We're definitely talking about that one for sure. All right, so we talk about 125% FCR versus 75%. How much of a difference does it make? Is it just for clear speed? Yeah, it's just for clear speed. So we're actually going to talk about that when I go over some of the other variations of the build rust. 125 FCR affects everything on this build. So maybe let's emphasize this a bit more here. It affects her teleport speed. It affects her cursing speed. It affects her corpse explosion speed. It affects everything. It even affects your rate of your Poison Nova. One thing to note though is that the way Poison Nova works is that Poison Nova, you can't stack it on top of an enemy in the sense that it does 20,000 damage if you keep doing this over and over. It will just refresh the tick. So the way poison damage works in Diablo 2 is it refreshes it. So now it again does 10,000 over 2 seconds. If I hit them once and it's only been like 1 second, I can refresh it back up to 2 seconds. So the damage tick continues. But it does not like stack the damage like if you do this. I think that's definitely a misconception about how this build works, and it's not something anyone in the chat mentioned, but it's definitely something I should mention for sure. I think it's something that a lot of people maybe don't understand about this build. Alright. Here we go. And now, let's get it. Do you need claws? You need claws or daggers, PB Gold? Or I think claws only in LOD, but I'm not sure. I know in PD2 mod you can use daggers, so. Alright. I have to remember because I haven't played martial arts in like LOD, so don't ask me at the moment. Alright. So here we go. Once again. So, Travancore is actually pretty amazing for this build. But I would recommend not doing it in player 7. So we were doing player 7 for the pit and the cows because he can handle it and because it's so effective. These monsters though are kind of optimized in P3. Matter of fact, I think I'm going to redo it in P3 so you guys can see that real quick. Yeah, you can check out BOTP Encore if you want to see the results there. Poison Nova Necro killed it. Absolutely killed it. Okay. Sweet. Alright, so players 3. There we go. So, the character that's got all the plus skills that we have and everything, bam. There's no poison resistance in here, so as a Travancore farmer, the Poison Nova Necro is one of the lesser known ones, but it's actually a really solid Travancore farmer. Which is why even though we're skipping over other areas he's not really good at, he's actually really good at Travancore farmer. I wouldn't recommend turning it up to player 7. You don't even have to for council members. They're not. You don't get a huge benefit from player 3 to player 7 of bosses, council members, and other monster types that tend to have either guaranteed drop or drop a lot of items. So, yeah, it's not a big deal. Matter of fact, if the guaranteed drop like an elite monster, players 1 is the best, but players 3 is going to be nice there. River of Flame is not usually going to be good because there's usually a lot of poison immunes in here, but sometimes it's pretty good. Let's see actually what kind of spawn we got here. We're going to turn it back to player 7 to see kind of... So you guys in general can see where his damage is at. You might also notice on the standard version of this build, you can also put poison facets in there to make your damage even stronger for the majority of the game. So instead of ist here and an ist here, you can have poison facets there. That actually makes your damage even higher. And in areas like this where there's more poison resistance or even like poison immune, like that's not going to matter, but mercenary can still kill one. And can still kill them. It's definitely slower, but that's why I don't recommend doing like River of Flame when you have these poison immunes, but I think in general you guys can see that this build does very well at this in particular. Hey, what's up, man? Amp plus CE is GG. Yeah, it is for sure. But yeah, anyways, so Chaos is not one of his best areas, but it's pretty strong. The reason why is even though there's no poison immunes in Chaos, there's a lot of fire immunes, and Corpse Explosion damage is pretty significantly fire damage, especially with your Infinity, right? Of course, once you use the Amp for Corpse Explosion, it's not too bad. A lot of the monsters in here also have a decent amount of physical resistance, so you can do player 7 Chaos, as you can see right here. And if you practice these movements, you can it can be as dangerous as zombie in here. Just skirt around the enemies so you don't get hit too many times and you don't take too much damage. And then use no resist. Recast your bone armor. Amp. And players 3 Chaos is even easier than this, so you know you guys can see that this is definitely more than doable. This character is just a monster in general. One thing to note is that we're using Enigma here, so you don't necessarily need Bramble's damage. It's the really key part about this build is making sure you have a lot of poison damage, but you also have your Corpse Explosion radius squared away. And then you can do tons of damage. So, one thing in Chaos is if you're gonna do Chaos in this character, try to focus down like the Doom Knights and the Stormcasters and use their bodies for Corpse Explosion. Because the Venom Lords are fire immune and have a lot of physical resistance. So it can be a pretty big thing to do that. Okay. I'm doing great, Visual. How you doing? Alright, so yeah. Of course, you can go back to using Poison Nova if it seems like one monster isn't draining quickly because they're physical and fire immune, or they're just really fire immune in general. But yeah, he does very well in here. This is a very solid 85 area. It's also a quintessential Diablo II farm area. And he can do this very well, easily as well. With his versatility, like I said on Emphasize, he pretty much can do everything. I'm trying to show off what he's really good at, or at least explain what he's not best at and why. So now for Diablo in Player 7, this is honestly a bit of a struggle. Your best option most of the time is just to lower resist him and use Poison Nova, get some revives, and make sure your Iron Golem and your Mercenary can tank. Of course, this is player 7, so if I was in lower player count, he would go down a lot faster. He's not very good at killing bosses. It's definitely a weakness of this build. He's a density destroyer, not necessarily a boss destroyer. One thing you can do, though, for extra credit, and even against Diablo clone, is you can revive Erdars, like Blender Board type monsters. And you can use those revives to use their crushing blow to kill the monsters very fast. You can even kill D-clone on a poison necromancer like that, especially if you use Poison Nova while the Erdars are smashing Diablo clone. It'll prevent his healing, and then the rest of the monsters do the job. Let's see if I can find the monsters I'm talking about real quick here. Okay, they're not actually in this one. Let's see. Are they in here? Doesn't look like it. Yeah, they're this dude right here. You want those dudes. So there's all kinds of monsters throughout the game that are like this. There's also Erdars in River of Flame. If you revive a bunch of these, and then you just teleport directly on top of a boss like Diablo or D-clone, you can destroy them with Erdar monsters. You just revive only those, teleport on top of them, use Amp to amplify their damage and make it even faster. Add the Mercenary, get some procs off as well. And then with his crushing blow on his weapon, on his Infinity. And then you can just train him down from there, and you can kill him by spamming Poison Nova and kill him that way. Yep. You can solo all of Player 7. You can solo a full game with this pretty easily. And, you know, I'd like to emphasize, this gear is not even at max power. We don't even have poison facets. This character can be even stronger in even more areas. So you can definitely make him stronger. No problem. Thank you, Vitalism. OP. No, you cannot use a black flail. So flails do not work with martial arts skills at all. They have a weapon type limitation, PB. Unfortunately. I have someone asking about a different build. That works too, though. You guys can ask whatever questions you want. This is freestyle, so do whatever you want. Ask them all. The Necro did win. Yes, he did. Necro won, and we're doing his guide today, so that's kind of neat, right? Alright, so in Act 4, that's pretty much a good synopsis of his strength and whatnot. I notice we're still in Player 7, though. Eldritch and Shank are a joke with this character. They go down really fast. Even in Player 7, it's not a problem. Oh wow, we're full on items. Okay, I'm not even bothered picking that up. The color on those gloves is not amazing. It's probably gonna be kind of weak anyway. Do we find anything while messing around here? No. Okay. So let's go to here. You can just see Eldritch and Shank. It absolutely railed. Yeah, this character can do anything he wants. 3 sources of damage. The game Has very little resistance to this monster once he gets scared. That's just how it is. It's definitely one of the more fun aspects of this build is that you don't feel like you have to do one thing. Even though he is best in the pit, like hands down, you never feel like you have to run him in the pit. And there's other variations that specialize in doing different things. So this one just does it all. This one's like the generic poison necro. Got his damage, he's got a good balance of damage, magic find, survivability. Faster cast rate. You notice though with 125 FCR, we really have a good time. You know, oh, these dudes are physical immune. That's actually problematic because my mercenary actually can't he can't kill them with amplify, so he can't get bodies very easily. But yeah, he can kill it all. He can kill these ice caves. These aren't like max level areas like chaos or pit or anything or ancient tunnels, but he can. Let's see here. Drifter Cavern's an 85 level area. Not 85, sorry, 84. Which is a really high level area, and for the most part, he does pretty well in here too. The only weakness of this area is that you can also spawn these ghosts here, which are poison immune. It's not great overall. Also, you can't use those frozen creepers for bodies. This is actually a pretty bad spawn though, not gonna lie. Just popping into here, we encountered a much more challenging spawn overall, but you know, you can still get the corpse explosion going with the mages, so that's nice. And with the ghosts when you are able to kill them. I'm gonna be using a lot of Poison Nova in here. Yeah. It's fine though. Definitely not the most optimal area in the world, but he can even do something as challenging as this. It's just a little slower, that's all. Alright. You guys love my haircut. I mean, that's awesome, but I honestly didn't expect the this level of response. You guys are awesome though. Keep it up. I just didn't want to feel like a hobo anymore, man. That's all I was trying to do. I'll take it though. What's up, Alpine? How you doing? What's up, Sandy Candy? How you doing? Well, I love you guys too. How about that? All right, here we go. We got. So he can do it all. But another area he's really strong in. In general, he's not crazy good at key farming. But I will say that any summon, or sorry, not any summon necro, any necromancer is really strong at killing Nilithok because all you need to do is just blow him up once you can kill his monsters. And this character in particular, makes really good use of Nilithok's minions, his bodies, by draining all their health and just getting an infinite source of explodable bodies very quickly. So, I can show that here, of course. Snakes are the worst spawn because they're poison immune. That's okay. You can just ignore them. Or just use the other bodies to blow them up. So that was player 7 Nilithok right there. That run looked like a cinch, right? Well, it's not always that easy. Sometimes you gotta kite around monsters a bit more, but in general, that's kind of how it always is. Fire, physical, and poison damage simultaneously. Given that Nilithok has a lot of immunities, and so there's also a lot of other immunities that spawn in there, this character has 3 sources of damage. He just does not give a flying F about what spawns in there. It's just amazing stuff. So I'd say one of his strongest areas besides pit and cows, I would say this is like maybe his 3rd strongest area. Maybe even his 2nd strongest area. Monsters in here have a lot of varying HP values, which is good for getting those bodies sometimes. Even when there's some high HP enemies, he's able to get bodies and fodders to kill other things. And there's just a lot of monsters in general here. The density is very high, just like cows, and especially the pit, which is a high max level area. This is another max level area. He's not good at killing Bale Waves and Bale, but it's all about going from World Stone to Throne in here. It's all about killing the elites and killing the density and flattening it for all manners of items, including every item in the game. So this is definitely one of his better areas. Alright, so without further ado, let's go check it out. I'm going to do player 7 once again, so you can see max player count or near max player count, so you can see a full game. One thing to note is these right here are poison immunes, right? Remember what to do with the poison immunes. Just use the mercenary and use amplify damage. Get some revives when you run out, so you get some meat shields. Always refresh your buffs. There's a lot of buffs to refresh, but it's worth it. On monsters that are highly poison resistant or immune, you're going to want to switch to amp and kill them with the mercenary as fast as possible. And then keep the amp on them for corpse explosion. Or apply it if it hasn't been applied yet. But you can see there's a lot of different situations, right? So this build plays differently kind of depending on what you're doing. But in general, this is the rotation. You can also lead with Poison Nova if you want. In some cases that might even be better if the monsters have low resistance to poison and they're low HP. So for instance, if I lead with poison here, and then go low resist, might not be a bad thing. But it can slow you down because you're not hitting the monsters. You're not lowering as many monsters' HP around you as quickly, which sometimes kind of like jacks up your corpse explosion a bit. But yeah, it's okay though. It's okay. Wow, that's pretty crazy, PDRN. Congrats, man. He welcomes it. We demands it. I love it, guys. Nice to hear, Alpine. Let's go. We're going hardcore tomorrow on the ladder reset. So this is a very good revive. So you might notice, I mentioned Urdars as being a really good revives against bosses for their crushing blow, so they can chunk the monsters for a percentage of their remaining HP. But another good monster is Death Lords. Death Lords are just really meaty, and they actually contribute a bit when they're amped. You might notice here, get some pretty decent damage going. Nothing too crazy though. It's mostly just a mercenary. You're not looking for damage from them. But yeah, we can blow up the world of Sanctuary with the Poison Nova Necro. Alright, my bow ran out. That almost killed me. This can definitely be a bit of a dangerous build to play at the standard version, but standard version is a softcore version, right? So this is not the hardcore build. We're gonna go over that build later. Especially if you play it in an area as dangerous as World's Stone Keep, right? I mean, even though you can flatten the area, it's still pretty dangerous. Yeah, once you get this level of gear, though, if you can get 125 FCR, this build just feels like a dream. It plays like a dream. It's a dream, man. Yeah, once you can get those corpse explosion chains going, especially against higher HP monsters like these dudes that have fire immunity, it's gonna be nice. Poison Nova is pretty much to get the corpse explosion started, but it's also to reduce everyone's HP so that the corpse explosion can 1 or 2 shot monsters around you. And that's just what it does. Interweaving those skills with teleport, bone armor, revive. It's just a fun build where you switch between all those hotkeys and just get it done. You can even show them off in World Stone 1, which is a really dangerous area. I guess you guys can also see him in Throne. So there's a lot of poison immunes here. I think all the monsters in this spawn are actually poison immune. It's definitely a bit challenging. But as you can see, once I can kill one of them, it's okay. Oh, we actually do have some of these monsters here. Come on, man. What the heck? It's because this guy keeps moving around. Okay, there we go. So yeah, this is a little bit more challenging. This is probably the most challenging situation is when you see like almost all poison immunes. Only some sparse, like, not poison immunes. But he can still handle it. It's all about making use of the corpse explosion rotations. It's a little challenging though, I will admit. Okay, I need bow again. Once you get some corpse explosions started, it's usually not going to be too bad. But yeah, if I saw that, I might even skip an area like that if you like see like crazy immunities. But it varies so much in Worldstone, so you can never predict it. It's like playing a piano, kind of. Yes. Keyboard is your piano. So we do have some more poison immunes in here, but there's not as many. I think there's only one poison immune group, so what we can do is use poison damage against the non-poison immunes, and then use amp and corpse explosion once again, and we're good. And those low HP monsters that aren't poison immune are allowing us to kill all these poison immune corpses here. So going after the monsters that are not poison immune is a good idea. Alright. It's looking good. And with Bone Armor, it's not even that dangerous with the Charger Zombies, but if enough of them hit me, I could die for sure. Absolutely. Okay. Sweet! Alright, so yeah, this build does it all. Once again, we have a balance of all stats. And that's pretty much all she wrote there. I mean, if D-Clone spawns, I could show you guys the Urdar trick on him, but I described it. It's pretty solid, and it works. But those are his strongest areas, and those are all those things he's really good at. Next, we're going to go into other variations of this build here, so things that are more specialized than the standard Poison Necromancer. I hope you guys, of course, learned a lot about the standard one in general and just what he's capable of. Especially after watching like Worldstone, The Pit, and Cows, so you can just see how ridiculous Corpse Explosion is. You have a ton of monsters that are surrounding you, especially ones that are not necessarily like poison immune, but even ones that are can be killed by monsters that aren't using Corpse Explosion. So, that's all good stuff in general. Let's see, let's go over now the Magic Find setup. So, the Magic Find setup, it's actually pretty simple. We actually already have a lot of the components of it. The standard setup, I'd actually recommend just having more damage, so facets if you want. Magic Find, you just put Is runes where you can, you emphasize it on all your gear that you can, say your rings, your amulet. And the big thing about the Magic Find build is that you really don't focus as much on your Nova damage and your Corpse Explosion radius quite as high, or quite as much. So we can still hit about 8.5k Nova, which is pretty solid. And all we really need is like 2 skillers. On this build, you can kind of go anywhere from like 2 to 4 skillers, and it feels pretty good in general. If you actually put like 2 more on here, your damage is so good in the pit that it feels even maybe more smooth. But then again, you can also emphasize a bit more MF. It's kind of hard to say which is actually better, but somewhere between like 2 to 4 skillers, and then if you put on Magic Find, that is the way. That is the way, that is the life. So if we put on a whole bunch of MF terms, just put on even more MF terms than we already have, we're gonna be fallen, so I can have more MF. We don't need all this crazy amount of damage. I can use 4 skillers. I'm actually gonna only use like 2 skillers just to show you guys that you don't really need that many to actually do this. Put on more MF. How about that? I'll do the force. I'll do the 2 skill variant. Let's see here. Okay. So Saint Gray. I know a lot of people are talking about the expense of the build. You might notice on the screen here under setups, we have a budget option. I think that might be the option most of you guys sound like you're interested in, which is really good because we're going to go over it. We're going to go over it 100%. Budget option, believe it or not, does not use Death's Web. So, just wait. Just wait. Wait, chat. Wait. I got you guys. Don't worry. This guide, we're kind of at least going over everything, if not going over everything in a lot of detail. So, I'm going to talk about it a lot. So now you can see my Magic Find is now a whole 100 higher, and I took out all those other skillers. In general, you can even get up to like 500 MF if you get like really GG like MF. Like if you had MF on my amulet, imagine having like 2 sockets in here and putting 2 Ists in there. Like, you can definitely get even more insane for sure. But in general, the goal of this build is to retain everything else, your Death's Web, your Enigma, so all your faster cast rate, a strong amount of damage, but not as much damage as the normal variation, and to stack your MF. This build specializes in the pit. Of course, the Poison Nova Necro in general specializes in the pit, but this is the pit specialty build. This is the build that's going to make you rich by farming the pit. Stack the Magic Find to use a minimum amount of poison skillers. Theoretically, you could even use 0 if you want, but once your Poison Nova starts getting weaker and weaker, sometimes it takes longer to kill the skeletons in the pit, which have a bit of poison resistance. So just keep that in mind. And if you don't have as many plus skills on your build, you might need to stack a bit more. It's always a balancing act on any build, but in case of this one, this is what you're going to want to do. So we're back in player 7. And I'll show you guys how he performs without those skillers. You saw how he performed with them. Just to show you guys, you really don't need for the pit. You don't need that. So they're just getting flat, right? It's not. Now I got more Magic Find, and I'm still flat. You know, that's the goal of this. This is the build we were using yesterday in Battle of the Pit. This is the variation, I would say. The MF-focused Poison Necro. So that, of course, you can find as many godly items as possible. That's how we found the Templars Knight yesterday. You just really want as much MF. Of course, you can find godly items with 0 Magic Find, but the more Magic Find, the better when it comes to finding unique and set items. That's how Diablo II works. There's no ideal MF necessarily. There's also no not ideal MF. There's no limit. It's just the more the better. There are breakpoints for unique Magic Find, but in general, the more you get, the more it's going to help you out. In the pit, that's no exception. He is a monster in the pit. With 125 FCR, there are no builds that really can quite keep up with his player 7 clear speed. There are builds that come close, but he is the king of player 7 pit, and even without skillers, you can see why. It's kind of comical how strong he is in here, but it's just amazing. It's just fun. This is where he really shines in general, and this variation of the build, the Magic Find focus variation, really shows off what he's capable of. Yeah, if you haven't played this build before, I highly recommend it because it's just a load of fun. And it really tests your ability to understand how to switch your skills. You know, if you're not using hotkeys, this build's a lot more challenging, of course. If you're not positioning yourself in the middle of the monsters when you use the abilities, it's a little more challenging. And if you're not comfortable with it, it's also more challenging. But in general, it's really strong. Alright, so I would say that's pretty much it for that variation. That is what it specializes in. if you lose this much damage, it's a little harder to kill like Worldstone. For Worldstone, I might make sure I have at minimum 4 skillers, but even having maximum definitely helps in there because there's just stronger monsters. Player 7, once again, is ideal for any density clear because you get the max amount of drops from all the items. I mean, from all the monsters. So all the monsters, even the random monsters, even the minions, are all dropping as many items as they possibly can. The more rolls, the better, even though the odds aren't as good as elites. You're killing the elites too, and you just get all their drops. So he really thrives in that full game scenario. But of course, we'll talk about you know, when you might not necessarily want to go for the full game scenario, or how it's still pretty good. This is a classic. This is LOD Chevelle. This is LOD. Sorry for not answering your question. Let's see. Sorry, Mater. Sorry, man. Rip. Saint Gray, that comment, man. I just saw that there up there. You're hilarious. Alright, so let's go over the next variation because that's pretty much it. You might notice for that one I had all the same stat kind of thing going on, all the same skills. It literally is just swapping out for more MF, so just making sure it's more Magic Find focused. Pretty easy stuff. Now what we're going to do... What's up, Too Cool? How you doing? Who won Battle of the Pit? The Necromancer. The Necromancer, he had really solid items, and he had a Baroon on top of what else she found, the Javazon, so... I'd say the Baroon was a decisive blow. I think people kind of knew it, too, when it dropped. It was like, oh, well, with all the other items he has already, all the other insane items, it's probably over. She didn't find a Hyren, so it definitely hurt her a lot there in that category. Okay. Oh, for show. You can have them when I'm done with this guide. So if you remind me to give you the free items, I can give them to you whenever, after I'm done with this, for PD2. So I can still give you the items, of course, I still have them. And yes, it's still free per day until I just dump them all on the ground, which might actually happen, I don't know, fairly soon. I'll probably just dump the rest of them on the ground. It's at that point. Okay. Alright, so we have... We'll just let the wolves, you know, just take the rest of them, you know. Whoever wants them. We'll give away some more Annies to specific people, and... Alright, so... I would say that... Wow, that's actually a pretty sick find there. 3 fast run walk, 11 fire is nice. Alright, so what we're doing next now is the cow variant of this build. So, remember I mentioned Bramble earlier? Well, you guessed it. Even if you didn't guess it, Bramble actually works in this situation. It actually works.
I can't use this yet.
It works, but the problem is that you'd actually have to respec for it. As you can see, I cannot currently wear it with Enigma. So what we're going to do is we're going to respec for that real quick and show you guys how this one works. Now, in general, having some source of teleport is really nice still, but you don't really need Enigma in cows because it's not like there's a lot of teleporting. You're already inside of the farm area when you make the cow portal, and you can already start killing the cows. Now, the reason why this variation works pretty well on cows is because you don't need teleport, and you're increasing your damage even higher. So the key to this variation is all about maximizing your damage potential and your DPS in general, so maintaining that faster cast rate. You don't want to emphasize MF too much because you're mostly looking for charms, gems, jewels, jewelry, and runeward bases in cows. You're not really looking for an item like Death's Web, even though you could find it in the cow level, which is ridiculous if you do. But you're not really looking for things like that. You're looking for like Jaw Rune, Zod Rune maybe. Looking for like really sick things. So if you want to just farm the cows though, this variant we're about to go over here specializes in farming the cows. So the last variant is the Pit MF Specialist character thingy. This is the other one. In general, though, this is literally the same. It's the same stuff as the typical version of this build, stat and skill-wise. So you don't have to really worry about modifying your skills too much. You can, if you want, you can actually put a skill into attract, though. So that's actually an option for this particular variant, to attract the cows. So if you cast this on one cow, since you don't have Enigma, you can actually get all the cows to go attack and to gather, even from off the screen, and congregate on top of one cow if you want. And then you can basically use your souped up poison damage to kill them even faster. But that's just an option for cow farming. So we're not. Matter of fact, I might show that actually. I mean, I've already got a respec anyways, so I guess you guys can see that. Let's see. Let's go. Now we still only need enough strength to wear the gear, though. Nothing really special going on stat-wise. The only problem now, though, is that since we're not using Enigma, we don't have all that strength it's giving us. I actually disabled that on my pluggy for the sake of challenge Vapor because I hate myself. I like difficult problems. Okay. Actually disabled it. Okay, anyway. We're also using a token to show how it would be done in BattleNet. These guides are meant for BattleNet as well. So I talk about how it's different on BattleNet. Talk about how it's not just a single player thing. So it actually helps out the guide a bit. So you can see how it's done. You know, I can use a token. It's fine. In general, though, as you can see, it's literally the same thing. Except now I have a source of teleport charges, and I have Bramble. Bramble is pretty ridiculous in terms of how much poison skill damage that you can get. My Bramble is not amazing. It's a medium Bramble, but if you have like a godly one, your damage just gets out of control. Really fast, especially with CE and whatnot. So, yeah. So yeah, we can kind of just show you guys, you know, we can get all the same stuff we were using before. And honestly, you don't even have to use Iron Golem in here if you don't want. Like, you can just use the Clay Golem. Because you can't teleport as easily, so you can't save him as easily, but you can still use Insight Iron Golem if you want. I think I'm going to actually use an Insight Iron Golem just to show you guys how this works. Maximum level, but yeah, anyway. So we're going to max out Corpse Explosion 110% in here because it's all about density killing in the cow level. There's definitely no options for that. Hey, what's up? 69 charges. Nice! That's right. It's a item that always has 69 charges. It's the best number. With that setup, the standard setup, it's 10k. With the setup where I only had 2 skillers, it was 8.5k Poison Nova Synchro. If I have 4 skillers, it's about 9k. But yeah, anyway. There's of course also the variable, the negative enemy poison res on the death slip, and how many plus skills you have elsewhere in the gear, but that's kind of how it works in general. Right, did we do it correctly? Answer is no. Still need our plus skills. Ah, no. Dang, I'm sorry to hear that, man. That really sucks, actually. I'm actually gonna get Golem Mastery because I'm gonna focus on like making the Golem a bit stronger here. Because I did lose some plus skills from dropping Enigma. But you might notice our damage now is out of control. Like, it's... Instead of hitting, like, 8.5 or, like, 9.5 to 10k damage, we're at, like, 12k damage. And, of course, you can pre-buff with CTA if you want, but you don't necessarily have to. I don't think I'm going to, because... I'm just gonna complicate things here. Router Tal Soul. Alright, that works. So alright, so now we're gonna make the cow level. You guys can see for yourself, like, just how ridiculous, like, this version of the build is for cow farming. It's pretty insane. Now remember, I can teleport if I want. If I get a teleport on my Ami, even better. So yeah, damage is enormous. Oh yeah, I forgot to get attract. Damn. That's okay. Attract is kind of... it's highly optional, I'd say. But as you can see though, I don't have Enigma, and one thing to note about Bramble is it's a little cheaper. And since this character is really good at farming cows, if you can get your hands on a Bramble, which is a lot easier to get your hands on than an Enigma early game, you can actually make a very solid cow farmer. And you can see in player 7, it seems like I'm draining their health faster, and that's because I am, because I have more damage. I don't need Enigma. I can just use a charge staff, or a charge amulet, or even a charge circlet. And we can just repair it afterwards. Especially if you have gold. It's very easy to do. Okay. Heck, I don't even have CTA, so you don't even necessarily need CTA for this. Once again, it helps keep your iron golem alive if you're going to use that for sure, but you can always just teleport away and just kite it out so until you get some revives. Nice! Ha ha! Detroitus, that's hilarious. I don't know why I don't have throw on there, so I don't read that. But yeah, I can just weapon swap to my staff, or if you, like I said, if you have it on your circlet or amulet, even better. And if you have attract, you can get even more cows to congregate, and you can use that to your advantage. Of course, another thing you can do is actually spam some bone walls, which also kind of works like attract, so I guess I can kind of show that here. Yeah, you'll notice they start coming from all directions to hit the bone wall. Bone wall, for some reason, enrages monsters from off the screen as well. This is kind of one of those aggro things. It aggroes all the cows, so if you use some bone walls, you can also put bone wall, like on your Y or something here. You don't necessarily need attract, but I do like attract. Attract is pretty nice. So yeah. Very sick, right? Very sick. See? Just put down some bone walls. Just to get the density going. Aw, damn. Okay. Be cool if we found a high rune while doing this. That would be nice. But notice how these cows weren't even over here a second ago? Nice use of bone wall, right? Yeah, I can get even more cows and blow them sky high, right? Easy. They definitely go down fast. Poison Nova. Because they're all weakened to begin with, so it definitely makes it really easy. Even in player 7, you just weaken them all with Poison Nova. And so yeah, this is a non-teleport variant. This is actually a late game build you could also do earlier in the game if you want, that does not use Enigma. And instead uses the rune word Bramble to take advantage of Bramble's increased damage. They're going to be doing more damage with this particular version of the build, and you don't necessarily need to teleport. But teleport would also make it fast, and even faster maybe in another. So it's hard to really say, but what I will say about this build is that it works very well in here. I wouldn't use Bramble outside of cow level. Every other area takes a lot of teleporting, and in general in this area you only have to do like a little bit of teleporting maybe here and there just to reposition. So it's very different in the pit where you have to like go all the way down in the pit, and then the pit's pretty long, and yeah, it's just Bramble's not as good as Enigma for the vast majority of situations on this character, but it does work very well in the cow level. So definitely want to make sure to show that, so people can be like, oh, well, you can use Bramble on this character. It's like, yes, you can, but you're going to be doing basically cows with it. We just went over the mercenary setup before. I can show you real quick. They're reliable. So it's infinity for a corpse explosion, the fire damage on it, and for damage, of course, as well, and just attack speed, damage, just making the mercenary really strong so that you can get the corpse explosion chain started. It's a might or a mercenary as well, which is really what you're looking for on this character. Okay. What's up, Borlak? Nice to see some of you guys today. Some of you guys coming around. Stuff. Imagine Iron Golem. Sorry I missed it before. Oh no, you're fine. You just weren't here before. I went over it like in the beginning of the guide, so it's fine. Alright, so we have now gone over the standard setup. We've at least talked about how you could use skeletons instead of revives if you were willing to take points out of corpse explosion. And of course, we've also talked about just the magic find, just how it's specialized in the pit, and how with the Bramble or rune word with some kind of teleport charges on your gear, you're going to be pretty good to go for the cow level. Now we're going to go into two more builds that are quite a bit different, and we're going to talk about kind of why these builds exist and what they're really meant to show, and we'll get into that here in a second. Alright, so this is it for this version of the Necromancer. Because I don't want to keep using respec tokens, I actually made another. So we have another Necromancer. He was a summoner, but I'm actually using him as a poison Necromancer today, just to show off additional versions of this build. Oh yeah, wait. I do have to transfer some gear, though. It's something I... Yeah. Okay, gear transfers. Focus. Okay. So, in general, the way this works is what we're going to go into next is something I like to call the budget poison necromancer. Now, before we get into that, let's talk about what budget means on this character. Budget on a poison nova necromancer is not very budget. Matter of fact, you could even consider the Bramble version of this character kind of budget, but budget still requires some gear to really feel pretty good, and it's difficult. You can of course play this character without Enigma or almost anything at all, but it becomes very challenging to position, and it becomes very slow, and overall it just doesn't compete versus other builds very well, even in the early game. So when I am about to show this budget version, I'll explain why it's a lot more budget and why it's so much cheaper than this build, but I'll also explain why it's not necessarily like dirt cheap. Poison Necro in general does not perform very well dirt cheap. It really thrives with God gear. I wouldn't say it requires it necessarily, but it definitely thrives with God gear. So we'll talk about kind of why that is and everything. I think we pretty much covered that base there. Yeah, it's like, okay, put those over there. It's fine. So let's go finish gearing up the budget version of him. course, we'll also put these over there too. We're also going to be doing the hardcore variant of this character as well to show a pretty solid hardcore approach, or at least talk about a very solid hardcore approach. Okay. Hey, thank you, Borlak. Dude, everyone's complimenting me on it. That's just awesome stuff. You know, I'm glad to hear you guys are liking it, man. Stylist did a good job, right? You know, good stuff. We made sure to tip her well. All right. Imagine Iron Golem. Yeah, that'd be pretty. Okay, so this character here is the budget version of this character. Now, when we talk about budget, I mean, for the most part, budget. So, we're going to be using like some... This is what I consider the most basic setup. If you don't have crazy items like Death's Web or Rack, and it's just really tough to get some other stuff as well. This is kind of what you're going to be going for. So let's go into it. So let's see what we got. Yeah. Yep. Okay, so. Alright, yeah. Good. Alright, so let's talk about this a bit here. Let's say you're just not swimming in insight bases, you're not drowning in insight runes. Let's say you just don't... Death's Web is one of the rarest items in the game, so it's literally the second rarest item in the game. Period. So it's insanely hard to get your hands on sometimes. Like, even if you can afford it, finding someone maybe to trade it to you or finding it is very, very troublesome, for sure. It is definitely best in slot on this build, but it's very troublesome to find it sometimes. Let's say you also don't have a torch and a nanny because you're just poor, man. You're in the poorhouse. You just don't have that stuff. You don't even have a rack, really. You don't have Death's Web. You also don't have crazy circlets or crazy crafted ammies. You don't have anything like that. You don't have all that crazy gear that really makes this build insane. But you have enough gear to make it strong, solid, and effective. So let's talk about kind of how this build works here. So this is the budget Poison Necromancer. Budget Poison Necromancer is still hitting decent res, kind of like the standard Necromancer does. Ignore the exact values on the stats. I made this character for both the hardcore and the budget version simultaneously, so in general, just get enough strength to wear your gear, which you usually don't need any because of Enigma, as long as you're still using Enigma, which you should be, at least for the minimum that I would use to have this character really be effective. You can go max block if you want with Tring Shield. It's possible, especially if you go like Eld Rune. I didn't put anything in it, but if you put like a rune in it, like a Shale or an Eld could help you hit max block. Or you can just go like somewhere between 50 and 75 block and go the rest Vitality. There's definitely a lot of options on this build. You can just go full Vitality with a Tring Shield. I don't really think it's too important. But there's definitely some options simply because Tring Shield's actually not bad for max block. And unlike Spirit. And you have nothing in energy. You never need to put anything in energy. You get enough from anything else you have, so it's fine. We still have a pretty solid amount of Magic Find. Any amount of Magic Find over 200 is really solid, but this is definitely budget. Like, this is not a lot of Magic Find. We are hitting 75% faster cast rate, so that is the next frame down from 125%. Remember all those crazy items that were required for 125 your budget? Yes, I'm a budget streamer. Here we go. Facts. Okay. Hilarious. Okay. 75% faster cast rate. So that is the next frame down from 125. You might remember we needed that crazy circlet. We needed that, caster amulet. We needed like a pretty solid one. We needed a rack. We needed spirit. Just needed all that faster cast rate. Okay, so You're not gonna have all that crap, I think, at the budget level. At the budget level, you should expect to be able to hit 75 FCR pretty comfortably, though. It's not too hard to hit 75 FCR on this build. 20% faster hit recovery. That's definitely a pain point, but there are ways to get more, such as putting a Shale in your Shaco instead of an Ist, but that's going to sacrifice some magic finds, so keep that in mind. Definitely a little bit more vulnerable to dying, especially. This is why maybe getting max block on the Train Wing is not a bad idea, so that you don't have to rely on faster hit recovery as much, because you're not using Spirit on this build, and you really can't use Spirit on this build, and we'll explain why. Spirit's a pretty budget item, but it's also not it's not going to be good on a budget version of the character who's missing Death's Web. Explain why that is. We have decent frezzes, we have decent damage reductions, so yeah, it's kind of the same thing as the original version of this build. We actually have more damage reduction on this version because you have Shaco, so that's actually not bad. I guess the budget version has one advantage. Sure. But overall, as you can see, our stats are definitely a little bit more piddly, but it works. It works just fine. We'll demo it. We'll show you guys whole 9 yards. It's very solid. But in general, that's what you want to do with the stats. With the skills, it's literally the same deal. Once again, you can choose where to put your extra points. I put some more points in a lower resist because we have less plus skills, so getting that lower resist is definitely pretty huge. It's a Poison Necro, actually, Endeavor. Poison Necro. Phoenix could work because of that, but you're already... so Young Nasty, you don't want to go too hard on the fire damage, though, because you already have lower resist, and you already have Conviction on Infinity, if you have Infinity. So even though you can go Phoenix Shield, most monsters at that point are already at negative 100 res, even if they have fire res on them to begin with. So you're not going to be doing too much with Phoenix Shield on the Poison Nova Necromancer. That's a good question, though. Wouldn't the negative enemy fire resistance from Phoenix improve your Corpse Explosion damage even? In some cases it could, but I'd say in most cases it wouldn't. And you don't need the... you already have an Insight Iron Golem, so you really don't need the sustain from Redemption on Phoenix. I would not recommend it. It also screws up kind of the rest of the build, especially on the standard version that uses 125 FCR and Death's Web, but it also screws up this version of the build for a different reason. So this is the budget, though. This is the budget Necro, budget Poison Necro. Alright, so then another thing we're talking about here on the budget Poison Necro is I'm actually not using the Iron Golem at all. I'm using Clay Golem because I'm not drowning in Insight bases. Budget, you know. Not. Another problem is that we also don't have enough plus skills, really, to get that Iron Golem HP very high, which is actually a bit of a problem. So it's definitely less worth it on a budget Necro to go Iron Golem. And on the... since we're not using Infinity on the Mercenary, because once again, this is budget, we're good. We don't need the Insight Iron Golem. We have Insight on the Mercenary, so we're okay. We have the Clay Golem as well to provide some extra tankage, so that's good stuff. Yeah, it's Poison Nova. Yeah, so we're doing a guide right now. You're free to ask questions and do whatever you want in the chat. Just have fun in general. Also posting this on YouTube, so it's fun. Revive. Once again, still get Revive. So as you can see, the skill tree is pretty similar, and you still need to get Iron Golem just to get Revive, but you're not actually going to be using it on the budget Necro. That makes sense, right? You're still going to be using the same skill rotation, though, so nothing really changes in terms of how you play the build. It's all about the skills and what's going down. Alright, so let's show the Mercenary here. So this Mercenary is a huge downgrade from the, the Rolls-Royce, right? You know, Rolls-Royce Poison Necro is sick, but like I'm about to show you, it's also not 100% necessary. So we'll talk about, though, like... this Necro has some weaknesses, so when you don't have like a crazy high damage weapon, especially like Infinity, you're probably not killing poison immunes at all. It's going to be very hard. I'd recommend maybe staying away from areas that have them completely on this build, so you're a bit more limited in terms of like what you can do. The Worldstone Keep, for instance, is maybe off limits when you only have like an Insight with like no damage. If you have an Insight with more damage, you might be able to pull it off, especially the amplified damage. but just a random ass insight or whatever, it's gonna be harder. I'd consider SCV insight pretty budget as well. So yeah, it's up to you. It's up to you. But your corpse explosion is going to be a little bit weaker because you don't have infinity as well. So killing poison immunes in general is just going to be more of a trial on the budget version. Treachery and Howl's Mask. So we're just using crap pretty much. I mean, you don't need much. You really just want to have some source of meditation. And because you're not very strong, Iron Golem's not really worth it at the moment. So you're fine. You're just getting some attack speed, some life leech, and res. Your mercenary can survive, but he's not really doing damage. And you don't really need him to. You just make sure to use the monsters around you and use their corpse explosion. And we'll show him off in the areas that he's strong in so you guys can see what's going down. Mercenary is still a Might Aura mercenary. Like I said, you know, if you have CV Insight, that definitely helps. But that's just a really crap one just to kind of show that you don't even need a GG Insight to do what I'm about to do. But you know, it definitely helps. Definitely helps. I'd consider any insight to be budget. So, for the record, all right, this is really the most budget weapon you can use to still be effective on this character. You might also be thinking about things like Black Bog Sharp that have no FCR, but they give you 4 skills. But your faster cast rate's gonna be so abysmal, and you're really gonna feel the effects of that. I really consider Hodo the most budget option on this build. It's just a Vex rune. I mean, I know it's still a Vex rune, but it's a Vex rune. You need the FCR still. You need at least a decent amount of plus skills, and you need the res from somewhere. So it's it's just gonna be painful. It's gonna be very painful. This is not a Death Web, of course. Death Web, once again, the second rarest item in the game. Very expensive or hard to acquire. It's definitely the best in slot, but if you don't have that, Hodos are dime a dozen, right? I mean, you can get Hodos pretty easily. It's not too hard to farm up a Hodo. Harlequin Crests of Shaco. This is a very generic helm, but it's still a good helm. You can use weaker helms for sure, but I'd recommend using at least a decent helm. I'd say Shaco is definitely the one that, you know, it's universal. It's not insanely hard to acquire, except maybe in the very beginning of ladder, and it makes it work. You don't need a crazy 220 circlet, but once you start getting those, that's when you can start going towards 125 FCR, and you can feel even better about your character. Since you have FCR in your weapon, in some ways, it is even maybe easier to get to 125 if you go that route, but it's actually harder because you don't have the negative poison res. So one thing we'll have to explain is that you don't have the negative enemy poison res from Deathweb. Let me repeat this. You do not have the negative enemy poison res from Deathweb. It's almost negative 50 poison res. That's so much poison res. You lose that and your damage goes into the floor. So, you need to make up for that kind of, sort of, mostly somehow. Because even in the pit, there are monsters that have a decent amount of poison res. So, in order to do that, we use 3-piece Trings. That's right, 3-piece Trings. Now, remember, Tring Gloves is an easy to get item, and it's also the item we use on the main build, right? The standard version, the GG version, right? Because of all of its advantages for this build. It's not hard to get it, though. You get this. Tring Shell isn't too bad. It's a pretty common item. This might be the toughest part of this set. It's definitely kind of tough. It's not super tough, though. It's not going to be insanely expensive. Tring Belt is pretty rare. It's not crazy. It's not crazy. It's definitely, like, way more realistic for a build that, you know, can't get Deathweb yet. Deathweb's just hard. Negative enemy poison res. That is the stat we're looking for. That is why we do 3-piece Trings. Once you can get 3-piece Trings, you notice when there's only 2-piece, we don't have it. 3-piece Trings, bam. Negative 25% enemy poison resistance. That is what makes up for the loss of Deathweb. That is how we can still make it work. Without that, we have only lower resist, and that's just not good enough in most situations. This is not good enough. You need that flat enemy poison res, especially for poison immunes you can break with lower resist as well. And in general, that's just really gonna save the build when you don't have the crazy Death Web item. So that's what we're looking for here. That is why we use this. It also has 2 skills on it, just like Spirit, so it's pretty solid. Like this shield, plus this belt, plus these gloves, they all help out the build, but they especially help it out with that stat. That's really good stuff. Just find it, yeah, for sure. Just find it. All right, Mara's okay. So I show a Mara's here. But realistically, any like 2 skill amulet with like res or something or anything that's kind of decent here is fine. But Mara's is generic, right? It's not a crafted godly necro amulet. Right? It's a generic item. Just like this is a generic item and just this is a generic item. These are things that are not insanely tough to acquire. But that being said, you really do need at least decent items on this build. Like, Poison Necro is not going to be like the Javazon. He's not going to destroy with literal crap. Like, it's just not going to happen. You're not going to be able to get through hell with literal crap, and if you do, it's going to be insanely hard. You can do it, but it's hard. I'm not going to say it's impossible, though. That's actually false. It's not impossible. It's really hard. And you're not going to be, like, farming an area. That's for dang sure. It's not going to work like that. Now the middle piece of gear here, remember I talked about how you could use Bramble for cows? Well, you could also use Bramble on this version of the build too for cows, which is an even cheaper setup because Bramble only requires Sir and Ohm. This requires Jaw and Burr. Jaw and Burr are actually really expensive runes. That being said, even on the budget version of this build that doesn't require Disweb, Enigma is still kind of a generic item. It is definitely expensive, though. It's the only rune word that is actually expensive I have on this build. You might notice I don't have Infinity. Odo's not that expensive. But Enigma is still pretty huge. If all you can afford is Enigma, and you can afford these piddly Tring items and maybe a Shaco slap on an amulet, get a Hodo, you're fine. So maybe your main goal for this build, just to get it going so it can farm decently in hell, is to get your Enigma. Put all your wealth into this, just make sure you get that Enigma. Without it, you're just so slow. Unless you're in cows once again. And of course in cows, if you really want to boost your power, just use Bramble or something. Or you can even use something cheaper than that, like Viper Magi, but it's just going to be more of a struggle. You can definitely go cheaper than Enigma, but it's just going to be super slow because you can't get anywhere. It's just like most builds in the endgame that are not sorceresses in general. Without Enigma, it's just tough. So, even though this is a little expensive, it's still in my budget build because I kind of consider it kind of like the bare minimum requirement for a Poison Necro. I know that's... I wouldn't say bare minimum, but it's kind of the bare minimum for it to play and feel nice. You kind of want the builds that you play to feel good and to farm well and to farm at least somewhat efficiently. So... that's kind of what I'm feeling like here. You know, I definitely have argued with myself over this, but it's just kind of, it's just the way it is. Like, it's just, you can't get rid of that. Once again, though, it's a generic item, right? These are generic runes. Even though they're super rare, they're generic runes. And it's not like something like Death's Web that you find like once every blue. It is easier. It's easier than crafted and rare specialty items. It's easier than everything else, and it's a lot more budget. It doesn't even require Infinity, which I'm going to show you. You don't need that negative enemy fire res boost for Corpse Explosion. That's not required. It helps, but it's not required. So anyway, let's continue. Now I had that speech about Enigma. All right, so rings are a little more. You'll notice these rings are more garbagey than the other rings I was using on the standard version of this build. Well, that's because you don't necessarily need anything, but what gets you to that 75 FCR. So that's the most important thing. You're still giving us mana though, so if you have FCR mana rings, it's actually pretty huge. Boots. Boots, res, MF, whatever you really can get on boots. These boots aren't incredible, but you know, you can see that they're decent, right? Like any kind of like good boots that like help you with res, you don't even necessarily need ward traps on these builds. I mean, you can. Ward traps are good too. I would even consider ward traps generic enough to where it's budget, but it's still whatever. You don't have to use ward traps. You don't have to. Slam them. Ha! Sorry, Pulfers. Yeah, I just give it. Yeah. People are joking that if you give Enigma to a Hammered In, he destroys Chaos. Hey, well, yeah. See, Hammered In is what we call, an overpowered build to an extent because it requires cheaper gear to be like insanely effective, just overall. Like this build, once it gets like max gear, can destroy the Hammered In when it comes to the pit, but you really need that level of gear, right? Otherwise, it's pretty similar. So it's like that's just one of the advantages of hammers, man. That's hammers. If you slap on a Hodo, Enigma, and a Shaco, and a Hammered In, what do you think happens? It's already like best in slot almost, and it is best in slot in a lot of cases. And GG, right? All right, so down here I just have kind of like FHR to shore up some. You basically just want to shore up res problems, maybe life problems, maybe MF. But notice that my charms are now significantly less like insane. Kind of just using like just decent stuff. Whatever charms you can kind of scrounge together really. And then on the budget build, you don't need skillers. I like to emphasize that you actually don't even need this many skillers. You don't. You can still go less skillers even without Death Web, even without all the other stuff you might have. You don't necessarily need them, but they definitely help. We're getting our damage to 8,000 I bow with this build. We're using a CTA as well. We're using a 4-bow CTA, so we're just talking like an okay CTA. I wouldn't say you necessarily need CTA either, but you're definitely going to struggle a lot more without it. So I have it like some kind of a CTA here, and yeah, that's about it. But yeah, plain PNB skillers, also not insanely hard to acquire. I definitely consider this budget. I talked about how you can get up to 45 life on the standard version, but if you're budget, man, just buy the planes. You'll be fine. Buy the planes, find the planes, use the planes. You also have just kind of a whatever Geed's fortune as well. So, that's pretty much it for stats, skills, and gear on this character. So, I wanted to go over all that, though, just to kind of explain how it's budget and why it's budget. And once you see him in action, you'll see that, okay, this character costs significantly less in trade value than the other version of the character I showed, and it's still effective. One thing to also note is, once again, we don't have an Annihilus Charm or a Torch. We don't. You don't need them. So let's say you're too poor to afford the Annihilus and the Torch. You're fine. So this is no Infinity, no Torch, no Annie, no Death Web, no Crafts, no Crazy Circlet, no Crazy Charms, in case that's an option. Not even really Crazy Rings. And really the most expensive component of this build by far is Enigma. But without Enigma, you can still use it. It's just going to be more challenging. And you can use the Teleport Staff, you can use Nodges. It's just going to be challenging, and it's going to be a lot tougher, that's all. Once you can get Enigma, though, this build is fully operational. So, yeah, let's get to it. Let's see, we got... Yep. Alright, so what I'm going to do first is show you guys like how it operates in Player 7. So you guys can get a really full picture of like how it's different from the fully built out version of this build. So we're at 75 FCR, so you'll notice we're definitely teleporting a bit slower. I got my Clay Golem out as a tank. I can revive stuff. Okay. So you'll notice that it's already a lot slower, right? Especially against these skeletons who are heavily poison resistant. We don't have Death Web, so we're missing like negative 25 enemy poison res, and that actually makes a big difference in high player count. We still have negative 25 though, so it's still helping us out. This is why we got the 3-piece strings. But you'll notice that without Infinity as well, that the Corpse Explosion isn't quite as insanely strong. But hey, look, we just found a Bariza. That's pretty cool, right? Anyway. Still got some stats. And this is player 7 pit, so I would say it's still functional in here. But you can see there's a pretty major slowdown compared to the a fully built out poison necro. This is why this is not best in slot, and why you really want to go for that OP gear when you can afford it, or if you can't afford it on this build. So let's see. That's a good idea, Pulvers. Yeah, that's, you know, Hammered is just amazing at that, Ash. I mispronounced balanced. No, I didn't. When I referred to the Hammerden, I meant what I said. Balanced, quote. Yeah, balanced in quotes. Alright, so you can see that, you know, in general, though, it's still very functional in Player 7 Pit. Like, you can do it. We're just a little slower, right? You know, everything's a little slowed down. But it's not bad, and we're still shredding. We lose maybe like 15 to 20 seconds per run, so it's not that bad. As long as we can farm this gear, you know, we don't even necessarily need anything else. As long as we can get our Enigma, you can run the pit with this 75 FC or Poison Nova Necro, and it's actually really solid. It's going to be better than most builds with any equivalent amount of gear in the pit still, which is always going to be impressive, right? You can start to drop the player count in the pit so you guys can kind of see, alright, so maybe he's not as strong in Player 7. What if, you know, my party size isn't as high, or I just want to, like, farm in a player count that still gives me a lot of items from high density? You can also go for Players 5 or Players 3 in this build pretty easily. This isn't really a Players 1 build like Poison Nova in general, so I'm not even going to show Players 1, but you can see in Players 5, though, hey, look, Players 5 feels pretty good, right? See? Don't even need the other one. Not bad, right? So in an almost full party, you know, it's looking even better in here. So yeah. Really good stuff in general. Rotations are a little slower though. It definitely leaves you a bit more vulnerable, especially if you don't go max block in here. You don't have like max DR or close to it. Yeah, so you can get stuck easier. It's definitely not as crazy as the other build, but you can see that like in general, like it's solid. Like if you want to go for after getting a little bit of wealth on early ladder or something, if you want to go for like solid Poison Nova Necro for pit farming, go for it. You know, it's gonna do some good things for you. And then finally I'll show Players 3. Players 3 is where I feel like he's like, it's pretty much the same speed as Player 7 on like the max power Necro, except for the teleport and the cast speed. But in Players 3 you also still have decent drop odds, you know, you got decent drop odds from all the monsters. So like when you're not souped up, you're still gonna be able to kill like high density and pretty good player count without too much issue. Just find it. Just find it. Alright, so after this we're going to go over the final setup that we're going to discuss today. Which is hardcore. I am you know, these days I'm more of a hardcore player myself, so I'd be doing a disservice to any guide not to include how to do it differently on hardcore. So you guys can at least see, like, you know, what kind of setups or items are available. Poison Dagger Necro. Yeah, that's a good one. Poison Dagger Necro. Well, let's talk about Poison Dagger Necro for a bit here. Poison Dagger Necro is a bit challenging in general, so that one, we're not doing a guide on Poison Dagger Necro. No, it's unfortunately Poison Dagger is just one of those skills that never quite fits in the schema of the game unless you just want to play a hipster build just for fun, you know? Yeah, there's definitely a lot of options, but, you know. Alright, so there's P5, and then we'll show P3, and then we'll go over hardcore. So there's 3. The Hodo 3-piece string setup is... it works. It really works. It does. It definitely doesn't feel as close to as ridiculous as like having Infinity and Death's Web and all the other stuff and 125 FCR, but it's solid. And once you get in P3, you'll notice that it really isn't that bad. Like, it just means you have to sacrifice a little bit of odds on the monsters, and you're pretty much killing things as fast as you do in P7 with the other version of the build. And, you know, as a pit farmer, you know, as a budget version of the character, I'd say the pit is like gonna be your best friend unless you're going the Bramble possibility for cows. It's better than Desecrate when it comes to bosses. Yeah, that's another thing to know. Desecrate's not in this in the original version of the game though. So you actually have to have a body for Poison Explosion. I could show that actually, so you actually have to like blow up a corpse for Poison Explosion. So like for Diablo, for instance, you're not really going to be able to accomplish that very easily. That being said, it can be better, but Poison Nova does more DPS still, even with that. And unless you have a dagger, you know, you're kind of lost, man. You're kind of lost. So, Poison Nova Necro, even without that crazy good gear, is gonna be solid. But notice if I get rid of Enigma, all of a sudden I have to kind of like walk up to stuff, or I have to use like teleport, and then I have to go like this. And then I can't move really. I mean, I can do it to be fair, but it's gonna be a lot slower. This is not one of those builds. I feel like Enigma just does so much for this build, especially for areas like the pit, right? Okay. So anyway, I think you guys get the idea here. Heck, the Mercenary isn't even using a good insight, so, you know, this goes to show you that, you know, if you prioritize Enigma, you get your 3-piece trains, you get your Hodo, the sky's the limit, really, and you're set. You really don't need much more. You can take off some skillers, too, and you can see I have room to lose damage, so even if you can't get that many skillers, you're going to be in good shape. Alright, so that's about it for the budget build. I hope you guys all learned something about that, or satisfied at least with what that build provides and what it does. Okay, so we're now going to go back to a kind of a higher price build again to show how you can do it in hardcore a little bit different, so that you can do this pretty well. Let's see here. I want to see something actually. I don't know. Okay. It's funny. Alright, so now we're gonna be using some GGs again, and now we're tailoring him for hardcore. So in hardcore, you know, it's all about getting high block, right? The block is gonna be really, really important. I didn't get max block, I don't think, but I should have. In general, you want to get max block. You just want to be really tanky. I don't know why. Oh, I do have max block. Never mind. I see what happened. Duh. Duh. See what I did. Okay. Yeah. So one thing to note here is, oops. Yeah, we still need. Okay. Yeah. I need to see. Nope. Did I swap out my rings or? Yeah, I swapped out one. Okay. I think. I'm trying to remember what we did here. Okay, anyway. It's not a big deal. I'll figure it out in a second. A couple of swap outs, really. Couple of swap outs. So, alright, yeah, we want our infinity again, you know, we want our full power. Let's see, we want. It is not. What's up, man? Your wand? I was actually never rocking your wand. Actually, I think I gave it away. I think I gave it away to someone who actually needed it because I already had a really good one. I had a F one. So someone actually made good use of it though. Someone was very happy winning it as a prize in Slamfest, I think it was. Yeah. You're fine. Yeah, I mean that's you know, that's Restorama. Unfortunately, like the Blizzard Sorceress start, you saw with my Rags to Riches video, the Sorceress is just so good at getting geared up from nothing. Nothing. You know? It's just a unfortunate reality. You know, it's really can't cheap out on some things to an extent. And you know, it's the same thing with a Hammerdin, right? Like if you're a Hammerdin, I'd be saying the same thing, except at least Hammerdin has charge, and you can have teleport charge without Enigma, so yeah, it's not as challenging in general. It's not as challenging. One thing to mention about the budget build is he can do other areas. It's just gonna take lower player count in some cases, and it really is up to you. Like he doesn't have to be doing the pit, but staying in the pit as a budget, doing Eldritch Shank, the pit is gonna be pretty solid. You can even do like Nilithok with it though, pretty easily. And cows, you can do it with that build. You can do it with the Bramble build. Specializes in cows. You can do whatever you want. So, all right. We're not budget anymore, so let's take those off. Let's go put that one on. Yep, that one. That one. Yep, that one. Okay. It will usually, Detroitus usually. I can't say always, but in general, if you're Vita and you jump into monsters with fanaticism plus might, you're gonna die because they're all gonna hit you, and you're gonna get hit almost every time because you don't have a lot of defense, and you're gonna die. If you have max block, you could still die in some really dangerous situations. But you have more time to react. Usually you block most of the hits. And you might lose a lot of health, but you're usually able to pot it. So that's the difference there for sure. Okay. Alright, so it looks like this is pretty much what we want to do. One thing to note here is for this version of the build, we're gonna have like really good life res. Like these are the kind of charms you want on hardcore, especially if playing in some really dangerous areas. You can still use like a MF res if you're playing just in the pit or something usually, but even the pit can be pretty dangerous. So one thing to also note is that in hardcore, like, you know, if you're lacking like stackage on your res, which I kind of am in some ways, take out some skillers and put in some more charms. Like there's always it's always a balancing act, and hardcore is an even tougher balancing act. So when you play the hardcore character, it's definitely a nice balancing act in general. So I'm gonna stack the res, and looks like our res is actually pretty solid now. We even got a lot of stackage, and we have max block. All right, so we hit max block as I was supposed to. That's what I thought, but I wasn't sure. Okay. So yeah, all right. So all right. It's pretty much. Oh wait, that's not it. 100%. Yeah. It's okay. That's right. Okay. So. Right. Right. So on a Necromancer, there's a lot of different ways to make him tanky enough to survive hardcore and to make it to where your Necromancer isn't gonna die. But in general, you do things a little bit differently. You still get enough strength to wear gear like normal. That's just a normal thing that you're going to be doing. Also, I realized that my... yeah, you can definitely use a better CTA if you want to. And you can use like a Spirit, not a Lidless, but... Yeah, anyway, I think it's fine. I think we'll just show him off the way he is just at this very moment. Unless I have... I could put that on there at the very least. Okay, yeah. Alright. So... we're gonna just show off that we're just way more tanky in general, and I think you guys will understand what's going down here. I think we can also get, or we go over the stats, I guess we can also get that. Make another Iron Golem. 13, ugh. It's okay. Alright, so Iron Golem out of the Insight, like so. Got our Infinity Mercenary, so now we're kind of a high-priced build again. Rock the best! Wow, brand new member of Xana's Attack Squad, the Ghost of the Machine, the Arcane Disciples. Chat, spam those Eyes of Xana in the chat for a brand new member. Let's go. Let's go, guys, for sure. Alright, so... you can go cheaper on hardcore, of course, and do some kind of progression, but it's going to be tougher. And there's definitely going to be cheaper items than some of the items I'm going to show, and I'm going to go over them. But in general, your idea is the damage isn't as much as a priority so long as you can survive, and as long as you still have good utility and things like that. Alright, of course you can have a better CTA, but we'll talk about it. Alright, so stats, enough strength to wear gear, enough dex to reach max block. Max block plus bone armor on hardcore makes you insanely tanky. That is what you want. Because the Necromancer doesn't have a lot of health. It's kind of like the Sorceress, where the Sorceress kind of has more teleport speed as an advantage, but you can also even use 1 point energy shield if you want. Bone armor plus max block on a Necromancer is going to make you very tanky, especially when it comes to physical damage. It's gonna be pretty key there, I think, just in general. And yeah, we're gonna show that here in a second. Yeah, thank you so much, Brock the Best. That's very awesome. Yeah, so yeah, of course it's expensive stuff, but we'll talk about some cheaper options too. You don't necessarily need every single one of these items. This is the best kind of like hardcore version in my mind, and then there's like other stuff you can do. Alright, so we're hitting 75% faster cast rate. We still have 9k Poison Nova, at least with this version of the build, even without max skillers, so we have only 5 skillers right now. You can have max skillers if you want, especially if you get better lifers, but, you know, it just depends on your res balance. Remember on hardcore, you want to stack your resistances really high. So usually you want to stack them to, like, 75 plus if you can, because then you can survive, even Conviction Souls. You can survive anything with this build. This build's really tanky. We have almost 40% damage reduction as well. In general, One thing that can get me even more damage reduction on this build is putting a Burr Rune in my Homunculus. I'm not going to do that for purposes of the demonstration, but just something to say, you know, that we can get our damage reduction even higher. We have 75 FCR, just like with the budget version, but it's really hard to get 125 FCR without Spirit Monarch, especially if you still want damage. So with the best version of this build, you're not going to be going 125 FCR, which is fine because it still rotates just fine at 75 FCR. You have a decent amount of faster hit recovery, which is also very helpful. You don't need it as much though because you have maximum block, so it's not a huge priority. Max block means that you're using your block frames more often, so you're going to be mostly blocking with your Homunculus. You can even get a Shale Rune to increase your block rate too. So there's a lot of things you can put in the Homunculus. We'll go over that in more detail in a second. And then you just put the rest of your points, of course, into Vitality after you get your max block, if I didn't mention that already. You got your res, you got stacked res, so that Conviction doesn't kill you. You have max block, and you have damage. Okay. Skills, pretty much the same thing. On a hardcore version, though, I would emphasize more points into Bone Wall so that you have more Bone Armor. Remember, Bone Wall is more effective than just leveling up Bone Armor. Bone Armor only gives you 10 absorbed per level, and Bone Wall gives you 15. So leveling up Bone Wall is pretty nice. You still get your max and your core skills, and you still get the Iron Golem. One thing you can also do is because you have less plus skills usually on a hardcore version because you're using tankage gear that doesn't have as many plus skills, you can actually put more points into Golem Mastery because otherwise your Iron Golem, when your Iron Golem gets below, I'd say like 4.3k base life, sorry, like right now we're at like 3k, before CTA that is, it starts to get kind of squishy. So putting more points in a Golem Mastery is not a bad idea in the hardcore version, but then literally the rest of them I would just put into Bone Wall. And then you just put like a Revive, and it's the same deal. It's the same build. And that's pretty much it. Mercenary is the exact same as the standard version of this character, with the Might Aura and all. You really don't need to change anything up for hardcore. You can use Holy Freeze, but Holy Freeze shatters corpses, which limits your ability to use Corpse Explosion anyway, so it's not going to be amazing. One thing you can also do is use Defiance Aura for more defense, if you want to be even safer. But having that Mercenary start that Corpse Explosion chain quickly is kind of, I don't know, it just makes this character feel good whether it's softcore or hardcore. So it's definitely not something you're going to necessarily be going for. You can definitely stick with the Might Aura. So damage reduction is really huge for the DR. You got our stacked res, you got pretty much everything, and that's the key to this build. We're still going to be using Death Web for maximum damage, Enigma for mobility. This build uses Crown of Ages, but there's other options here. We can also go Shaco, which has less DR, but it has more skills, it has more mana and life. It doesn't have as much res for stacking res as well, though. I like Crown of Ages on this build, though, because you can even put Poison Facets in it if you have more DR elsewhere. Let's say you're using like Dungos or something and you have more DR like for Dungos. You can put like Poison Facets or something in here if you want. There's definitely a lot of things you can do with this, but this is giving us a huge amount of DR, faster hit recovery, res, and DR. It's really good for hardcore. And yes, I did self-find this as well, so this is one of my most impressive finds on the whole Grail, so I have to show it off at least once. It's pretty cool stuff. Did not hero edit that in, strangely enough. It's actually a real item it's found. And we put some Baroons in it, which is sick. It's really good for tanking in general. We have Enigma. We have a 215 Amulet. So because we can't really hit 125 FCR on a hardcore version very comfortably, because the helm needs some kind of DR from like Shaco, Crown of Ages, something in that regard. Maybe just even a circlet that with 20 FCR with like Baroons in it, it needs something. You're gonna need more FCR. You're gonna need at least 15 so you can hit 75. So we're hitting 75 here, and it really takes some pretty solid gear. So a really good crafted Ami would be amazing on this. On unless you're using like a 20 FCR circlet with 2 burrs in it or something, and getting your FCR some other way, then you can use like Mars, for instance, or something else. But in general, that's what you're going to be going for. Yeah, right. Troidus, what's up, man? Homunculus, up to Homunculus is just really good. Like I said before, if you want closer to 50% DR, which is standard maximum for hardcore play, you can get a Burroon in this sucker too on this setup, and that's how you get almost 50% DR. I'm just going for an Eldrin for having to put less points into Dex though, so we have more life. And that's definitely the cheaper option, but you can do the Burroon as well. Burroon's going to be really nice. You can also use Storm Shield. So one thing to emphasize here is if we use Storm Shield plus Enigma, we'd actually have 43% DR with these 2 items alone. If we put a Burroon into Storm Shield, we have 50% DR. Then we don't have to worry about DR on the helm at all. And then we can use whatever else we want. We don't really need Crown of Ages anymore, right? We could still use like a 320 circlet. We could use just whatever else options. We could just use a Shaco for a MF. We could do whatever we want. But Storm Shield means we don't have 2 to Necro skills. It means we don't have 2 to Curses. It means we have less all res. This shield's just so good on hardcore if you can make it work for a Necromancer, because it still gives you skills, it gives you res, it gives you block chance, and you can even fit a Burroon in it, and if you use Crown of Ages, which doesn't really lose you that much damage overall over other options, you can still make it work. So there's definitely other options. Storm Shield's always good on hardcore, so I mean, we're not using a Storm Shield in this setup, but it's always good on hardcore. I'll say it again, it's always good on hardcore. Almost always, unless you need 2 weapons, it's always good on hardcore. Okay, alright, I'm done. Alright. Yeah, so anyway, Storm Shield is amazing, especially if you're not using Crown of Ages. Alright, I stack in my res. I got sick res MF boots here. They don't have to be this sick, of course, but they're sick. You get the idea. Stacking res, stacking everything we want. Always use train gloves on this build. There's no reason not to. Res, you need that FCR, you need that poison skill damage. FCR, life, res, even MF, mana, whole 9 yards, you get it all. Just get some sick tankage rings, maybe with MF as well, if you can afford them, and stack them on there, and you're good. I am using Arachnid's Mesh. One thing I mentioned, though, is you could use Dungos. Like, let's say you want to use a different rune in your... Let's say you use Storm Shield, I guess. You use Storm Shield plus Dungos. Or you could use Dungos plus this setup with Burr. So you could use Burr in here. So you get 8 plus 8 plus Dungos. So you use 31 DR. And then you can get some more damage up here if you want. You can use like 2 burrs in a 20 FCR helm, so you can still hit that 75 breakpoint. And you could use like a 320 or a 220, a 2-socketed helm or something, or a 1-socketed helm, and you can still hit close to 40% DR, kind of like we're hitting right now. So lots of options in this area here, except for the Enigma. So yeah, there's definitely things you can do. This is a nice setup. No, Storm Shield's not good on hardcore. You know, I lied. No, just kidding. Alright. Necro Torch, Annie, once again, are ideal. And then, of course, you know, more life. As much life as you can fit on these, of course, is going to be great in hardcore. And then life res, MF res, whatever you can afford. I'm going to be as tanky as possible just to show how tanky this character is, though. And overall, just to, you know, get as high of a CTA as you can with the Spirit, and bam, 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 you're good. 75 FCR. Alright, this build set. We got a pretty high bone armor. You know, we got setup. We got stackage. We're set. So on this build, we are still super souped up because we have Death Web still. We got all that negative poison res. And we have Infinity for the Corpse Explosion. So player 7 Pit is going to be no problem for the hardcore Poison Necromancer. We're just not using 125 FCR. Some people might note in the Battle of the Pit, I actually freaking died last night on the software version of the build with Spirit, so that's not common for me particularly, because, you know, I've just played this game too much, but in general, you could do Spirit, you could get away with it for a long time maybe. You don't necessarily need all this hardcore specific stuff. You don't even need DR, but you might die. It could definitely happen. With the archers in here and with auras, people saw it happen. You get a bad teleport, you're dead. So not going max block, not having DR, using spirit, you know, it's possible to run that on hardcore for a while, but remember, hardcore is all about risk tolerance, right? So it's like, how much risk do you want? You might notice there, though, I took hardly any damage. And, yeah, I'm fine. Hardly any damage, and P7 is still easy mode. Yeah, I don't have to worry about dying at all on this build. Like, it's nothing they're gonna do. And this is gonna be nice, just in general. So it's really good stuff. All right, sweet. But yeah, but see, unlike the max block Hammerden you have, I have bone armor on top of that too. I have bone armor, and I have more DR than your Hammerden probably has. I don't know how much damage reduction you're running, but normally a Hammerden doesn't run all that much damage reduction because you can rely a lot more on the Hammerden's defense stat and some other things. As someone in the chat was mentioning how the Hammerden seems even tankier, but it's not necessarily the case. Hammerden has some advantages, but remember the Hammerden also has to jump directly into the monsters always. So, whereas with this build, I can kite on the outside if I want to. Oh yeah, look at that. No triple durability set there. No triple durability Crown of Ages for set. Hammerden will probably never die in pits on the standard build, yeah, for sure.
The order welcomes you.
Oh no, it will never die, for sure. Even with the standard Hammerden build, you can play him in hardcore, and you could die in the pit. Like, I've gotten low before, but it's definitely harder. Like, even on a Hammerden in the pit, though, like, it doesn't hurt to, like, stack a Crown of Ages if you got one lying around, but, you know, not everyone has one of those. This is one of those other ultra-rare items, right? So, in general, this is a very pricey build once again. But remember, you know, you can use Shaco, you can use Dungos, you can use Storm Shield, which makes the whole build cheaper, because then you can just, like, slap on some other stuff. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely ways to make every build a bit cheaper, so, you know, remember to, even though I'm showing you guys, like, what I would consider to be, like, solid versions of different variations of this build. Yeah, look how tanky I am, though. So, I'm playing Worldstone Keep right now. We got Worldstone. Worldstone player is 7, and I'm amped. This is good stuff, right? So, I am still going to, you know, even in an area as dangerous as this, I don't feel very scared in here. Whereas on my standard version of the build, you can see I was kind of getting close to dying pretty often. And that was normal. Definitely want to walk or put the walk button on in hardcore, something I wasn't doing there. So that when you walk away from the monsters, you're not lowering your block chance. Fun fact, if you run instead of walk, and you're getting hit, you actually have only 1/3 of your block chance, so that's really bad. Like this, like if I'm walking right now, that's good. I have all my block chance. If I run, I don't have my block chance. Fun stuff. So yeah, I mean, even in Worldstone 1, I don't know about messing with the charge zombies too much, because their charge actually bypasses block. But if you don't get charge zombies, even Worldstone 1 is, you know, it's just fine. And even though your damage is probably going to be lower, it could be higher if you have more life skillers, right? So you can have more damage. You can definitely even improve this build in various ways. Yeah, Barb for Mad Traverns would be pretty sick. But one thing I gotta tell you though is that unless you can gear the Mercenary really cheaply, you are gonna be doing not much until you get like Grief and whatnot for Trav farming. It's gonna be a lot harder. But once you can get to that point, you can definitely do it. You can also use Oaths for Trav farming, which is gonna be pretty decent on a Barb. Which isn't that expensive, I guess. But you might find it challenging to start with the Barb, simply because unless you have like friends to help you out with gear, because it's really hard to farm in the beginning solo on a Barb. It takes a lot of time, and it's definitely not impossible for sure. It's very, very possible, but it's going to be very time-consuming, especially compared to something like a Sorceress. You might have to find yourself an LK a lot, running just chests in general with Harmony. I don't know, it's going to be tough. Until you can get some basic rune words and some other stuff, it's going to be a bit of a challenge. You can always start out, of course, with like Black Flails, but you're just going to be wailing on those bosses forever. It's going to be challenging. Alright, so as you can see, the hardcore version of this build also can run Worldstone Keep, but now you can see how safe he is. Like, he's just so safe now. I'm gonna just like sit here in the monsters for the most part. I don't even have 50% DR. Imagine if I had another bird here, I could be even tankier. And remember, I can refresh my bone armor as much as I want. So if I get trapped on hardcore, I can like, I can time my bone armor in between uses of my potions, and I can be like almost invincible. So this is not a scary version of the Poison Necro at all, and it's really nice. You don't feel like it's very scary. The original version's a little scary, so if you want to play hardcore, just play it like this. Play it with the gear, the stat differences I mentioned. Get that max block, get that DR, get your stacked res. If you run into souls, you can even swap your belt out for Thunder Gods. So you always want to swap. Thunder Gods is amazing with souls, and it's very dangerous with souls, even if you have stacked res, because there can be enough souls to kill you sometimes. So make sure you set that Thunder Gods as well. I do, Saint Gray. You still can put an Is rune in your 2020 and in your Death's Web. I don't really feel like you're already getting like 400 to 500 MF on the standard version of this build sometimes, and with the Pit MF build, you're definitely getting closer to 500 MF with really solid gear. So, and that's with 125 FCR. Your kill speed, all of your abilities use cast rate. So like, it's gonna smooth out everything. It really saves a lot of time. So if you can get 125 FCR, it's gonna be better than increasing your magic find from like 450 to like 550 or like 500 to 600. It's not going to give you that much. Diminishing returns on Magic Find are really high up there, and that extra speed is just going to be like so much better. That's a good question, though. That's a good question. Like, it slows down everything. Like, you can see right now, like at 75 FCR, if you remember how fast my 125 FCR Necro was, you can kind of just see, like, you know, there's a pretty big difference. It's a pretty big difference. Whereas, like, the difference between 500 and 600 MF is not huge. Not huge. It's not nearly as big. And if you think about it, like, if you stack more Magic Find, you might have to sacrifice some more damage in general. Even more damage, and it might just get even slower. So that'll take it into account. As long as you can get 125 FCR in the pit with over 400 MF or 125 FCR everywhere else, it's definitely going to play a lot better, and it's going to feel a lot better, and it's going to be more efficient in general. That's a very good question, though. Are there any Are there any more questions about the Poison Nova Necro in general, guys? Do we have any more questions? So yeah, there's a lot of good stuff just in general. So like you guys saw, you know, the different play styles, right? You saw budget, how budget is still very functional and does not require nearly as many high runes in cost or just super ultra rare items in general. Um, Especially not even a torch or an Annie. So I even threw out things that might be more budget for you, but I threw them out because just to show you that you don't need them. Cow farming, I even showed you how you don't necessarily need Enigma, but if you get Bramble, you don't need Teleport, and you can still destroy the Secret Cow level with a ton of poison damage from Bramble. We also showed, of course, how you can survive very easily with this version of the build. And we also showed, just in general, like your Magic Find, your cows, like everything else. Just everything is really solid, just in general. It's good to go. So we got all that stuff going down. It's all solid. It's all really good. So yeah, we got all that stuff going down. We saw the standard version, how he's really good at doing everything, flattens the whole game in player 7, and how, you know, they all kind of specialize in their own way. They're all very strong. And the Poison Nova Necro in general is no build to laugh at. It is crazy strong. It can deal with any immunities, especially with maximum power. It does it very well. And it is a bit pricier overall. Like if we had to like compare this overall build, the Poison Nova Necro, to like other builds, like let's say a Hammernin, it's definitely a lot more pricey, 100%. It's definitely, if you want that level of power, you're gonna have to pay for it. And it's really fun though. It's really strong. It's very powerful. It's really fun. I don't know. It's just like you just jump everywhere. You're constantly weaving your attacks. It's just a lot of fun. Right, right. What's up, Ada Mamak? How you doing? So, yeah, for sure. For sure. He is a god. Fartmancer. That's a good name for it. Are there any more questions, though? Did anyone have any more questions about this build in general? Do you feel like there's maybe something I didn't talk about at all? Something that in? This is the question and answer session here, so feel free to let me know what's going down here. Anything? Anything at all, guys? Any other ideas? Is there something like because I know there's a lot of good questions actually in the chat today. There's a lot of good questions and there's a lot of good points. You know, some people were anticipating the budget build a lot. They're like, "How do you afford this crap?" It's like, well, you don't necessarily need it, so it's like, yeah, it's definitely more reasonable for players 3 stacking MF instead. You know, you could do that, yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, if you don't want to let's say you're focusing more on the elites and set items. So that's a good question, is like you can customize this build in even more ways, right? There's always more ways to customize every build. Um but one thing to note is like let's say you're in the pit, right? Let's say you don't really care about jaw runes and Zod runes that much. And let's say you have all the gear you could possibly need and you want uniques and sets though from a Poison Nova Necromancer maybe more often. You could stack even more Magic Find. You could um you could not use necessarily 125 FCR. You can sacrifice the FCR for Magic Find as well. And then you can stack even more, and in players 3 it's going to feel almost as good. That being said, you still lose your teleport speed though, so there is still a drawback. Players 3 though is still going to give you at least decently good odds at things like high runes, so that's not bad. It's not a bad approach, and you can totally do that. You can totally do that. However, if you really want to max out those odds, Players 7 is so easily and
I
so
can already tell that I'll be your best friend in this
might
camp.
be mellow. Thank you so much for the follow. Welcome to the Cult of Xana State. It's so effortless for this build to flatten Player 7 pits, though, even without skillers, that with that FCR, like I don't know. To me, you may as well do it. I mean, if you really want to like push the limits of 600 magic find or whatever on this build, do it by all means. But eh, diminishing returns, man, you just get so much slower under corpse explosion and everything, and your teleport, and you get caught more often. I don't know. Like you can do it. You can do it. You can customize the build in all kinds of ways. All right. And as long as you keep in mind the principles of enemy negative poison res, your FCR just in general, your damage, infinity if you can get it, make sure you get all the right stats on hardcore as well, and then other situations. As long as you kind of keep in mind those principles, customize it however you want. We don't have any more questions though. I don't know. Do we have any more questions, Jen? Any more thoughts? Any more reservations? I feel like we covered a lot today, and I feel like this guide's gonna be pretty sick. It will be, of course, on YouTube. So yes, YouTube, we are talking to you, and hopefully you guys can learn a lot more about how to customize and how to use the Poison Nova Necromancer effectively to destroy the game. Just bomb Sanctuary with this build. Everything just, it's so satisfying to watch the monsters just drain away and blow them all up and just blow up the screen with a huge radius corpse explosion. Like just, it's almost nothing like it when it comes to density clearing. Diablo 2, Lightning Fury, I would say, is a pretty solid example of a good skill that does something very similar. But yeah, it's very versatile too. It's got 3 sources of damage. It's just crazy. But yeah, GG. If there's no more questions, that is all. That is it. You can catch this guide in my LOD guide section on YouTube. Of course, you can also check out our Project Diablo 2 guides as well, in addition to our LOD guides. This is a D2R prep guide for the released in advance of D2R, of course, so you guys can learn more about awesome builds and just awesome progression in the game in general, so you guys are prepared. Of course, really love this character. This is one of my favorite builds, so I really had a lot of fun making this. GG once again. Catch it in the in the LOD guide section of my YouTube. You can always catch it anywhere else. This S tier density clear, gotta try them, man. Gotta try them. We'll have the timestamps, of course, in the description below as well, in case you guys want to look at any particular setup, want to look at the intro, the conclusion, so you guys can understand this build a bit more. And always catch me at www.twitch.tv/Dark Humility if you want some live Diablo 2 variety action, usually 6 to 7 days a week. And I think that is it. I will see you guys next time for another awesome installment guide. Let's go. Dark Humility, over and out.